Well, I'm glad to be here. A few of you I had met when I was at Metro, which is kind of close, somewhere near Detroit too, back in November. And so I know some of you from that, and I love Michigan. But I got to tell you, I'm from West Texas, and it's true. We live on a ranch out there, and I work part-time for Herald Truth and part-time for our local congregation, Hillcrest Church of Christ in Abilene. And then we try to run a ranch. So my wife is feeding cattle this morning. So, and even, okay, all the ladies cover your ears. Guys, I'm going to tell you this is bad. Today's her birthday. I know. And I'm up here in Michigan preaching. The only thing that's good about that, before I booked this, I asked her. And she said, no, I'd rather you go preach. Now, that's either really good or really bad. No, she's really supportive of it, because I travel a lot, and she's really supportive of this. So I'm glad, but I got to tell you my one Michigan story that will tell you the difference between people that are normal and understand weather and people from West Texas who don't get a clue. So I'm over in the Ann Arbor area with Chelsea and Dexter and those churches. We're doing something similar to this, and they're having all a bunch of people together. And so I get up, I open my hotel window the morning of the event, and I called them and I said, listen, we've got a blizzard. Are we calling it off? What do we do? And they got, a blizzard where? And I said, well, I'm looking right out my window. It's a blizzard. He starts laughing. I said, what are you laughing about? He said, that's snow flurries. And I said, no, I'm looking at it. It's a blizzard. And he said, you're scared to drive in it. And I said, I'm not going to drive in it. No, I'm not. And he said, we'll send somebody. And they send a lady. She had to be at least 80. And she's in a little bitty car. And she says, get in, Sonny. I knew then. And to me, it looks like a blizzard. She's, now you could, there were little cracks that she was in, I guess. And so when I got there was a big crowd, kind of like, and I said, how did everybody get here? And everybody laughed. Said, this was not even, we don't even call this snowfall. Like West Texas would shut down everything. That's what we do in Texas. You know why? We'll kill everybody if you let us drive on snow. We have no clue. So it's easier to shut it down and save us all than try to do that. So that's my Michigan thing. Well, I'm glad you're here. I appreciate everybody giving up the Saturday. I really appreciate Peter. He told me we need to get this done by 5 this afternoon. And so I misunderstand that. No, I have about 5 hours of material, but I talk fast, so that gets it to 4. And I'm going to hit the highlights, so that gets it down to 3. And we're going to take a break because he said some of y'all have to go to the bathroom halfway through this. So we'll try to do the first 2 sessions and take a break, and then do the last part. I've been doing this seminar for a long time for Herald of Truth, and then a lot of churches on my own that just hear about it and call. It's about how to live as a Great Commission Christian, being a follower of Jesus who makes other followers. You'll even get a chance to put this into practice this week, because Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday night, we're going to be getting together here to tell Jesus stories specifically for non-believers. And so if you've got friends you've ever wanted to hear a little bit about Jesus, this may be a great chance to invite your friends, your family, whoever you know to come here. And if you say, well, I don't know, I want to tell them we're having preaching. I'm not a preacher. I just get up and tell Jesus stories. That's what I do. I tell Jesus stories. And they're funny and insightful, and I hope it helps people be triggered to want to know more about the one who changed your life. So it'll be short and a look at Jesus. So today you're going to hear stories from the Bible, stories from believers today. I tell you a lot of stories from the stuff we're doing at Hillcrest in Abilene, because that's where I am and what I do. The hope of all this is to equip you and motivate you to do what you want to do, and that's to make more followers. That's what we want to do. We want to find people and help them come to follow Jesus. And so I do. Every once in a while, somebody says, "Okay, you one of those guys that just talks about it." You know how that story goes. If you don't do, teach. That's what they always. Okay, my job at Hillcrest, literally, this is my job description. Talk about Jesus. Now you're going, no, I mean, what's your title? They don't even really give me a title. I mean, when I introduce myself to people, they say, oh, you work at Hillcrest. What's your job? So talk about Jesus. Well, no, I mean, what's your title? Guy that talks about Jesus. I don't have one. That literally, when I met with the elders and they said, this is what we want you to do. And I said, so what's my title? And they said, well, you don't need a title, do you? And I'm like, no, I don't. Let's just talk about Jesus. So that's the kind of things we're going to be doing. Ooh, nice. The foundation for what we're going to talk about is what we commonly call the Great Commission. It's the foundation passage about making followers. Especially, I want you to notice how it starts and how it ends. This is Jesus talking, and he starts off with all authority. Okay, this is not, your elders do not get together and say, we got to convince everybody how to reach people. I wonder if anybody's ever thought about that. This is not because your elders want to do this, not because Peter wants to do it, not because your outreach team wants to do this. They all want this to happen. But we're doing this because Jesus said to us, I've got all the authority, and here's what I'm telling you to do. And so this comes not from Steve, not from your elders, not from Peter, not from your outreach. This comes from Jesus. What we're going to talk about today is Jesus' call in your life. And then I want you to especially look at the end, because when we talk about reaching people, making followers, there's a little, maybe natural in some ways, apprehension, a little fear. Well, I don't go talk to my neighbors, my family, my friends. And we're going to address a lot of that today. And we're going to talk a lot about that. But I want you to know, when you go across the street to talk to your neighbor about Jesus, when your family comes over and you want to lead a prayer and say something a little more about Jesus, when you talk to your coworker, invite them somewhere or say something, I want you to know that Jesus is right there with you. He said, I will be with you. I am with you always. So you need to know, when you're a little scared about that, Jesus is going across the street with you. He is there in the conversation. And I think that should be something that encourages and helps us. So I want to talk a little bit about the Great Commission. Now, as I talk through this today, I want to be real careful, and I probably need to be sure I put some parameters around some of this. This is Steve. I mean, when I say, here's the scripture, that's God. When I say, here's what you need to think about, that's who? Yeah, that's Steve. So, if you say, yeah, it's nuttier than a fruitcake, you will not be the first one to think that. If you say, I don't know how that guy gets that, you will not be the first one to think that. If you fall asleep, you will not be the first one to do that. But I will give you a hint. If you get really bored, you get sleepy, and you're kind of nodding off, when you wake up, just do this. And everybody will think you were nodding in agreement the whole time, not sleeping. So maybe that will help. Or just yell amen every time you wake up, and that will impress everybody. So these are my observations from a lifetime of learning about Jesus. Most of I became a Christian at a young age and grew up in a family of faith. And so this is kind of my life. So with that said, the Great Commission passage is typically used by most churches for mission work. And how do you think most churches define mission work? What does go mean? Go what? Yes. Go. The Great Commission means go. I mean, it's out of Michigan. Texas is a mission field. Cuba is a mission field. Russia might be a mission field. It means, and so every time we have somebody in from another country, we love to read the Great Commission. We're doing the Great Commission, go into all the world. But what if what it really means is what I'm telling you is go out in your world. When I say go into all the world, what I mean is you walk out of these doors into your world and start making disciples. That's a little different than sending people. We love to interpret this passage as we're doing the Great Commission because we're sending somebody to. I mean, I'm from Texas, I'm up here in Michigan. I'm doing the Great Commission. Well, what if the Great Commission really means I need to be doing this in Abilene, where I'm from? So think a little bit about that. And I think we ought to say a little bit of what we're going to talk about today is going into our world. And we're going to talk about how we go, and we're going to talk about where we go, and we're going to talk about what we do when we get there. And so those are kind of some of the things we're going to talk about. But I want to start with a word about baptism. I want to be clear here. If somebody says, okay, so what do you think about baptism? I believe in baptism, but I believe in Jesus. And so I think sometimes we have used the Great Commission to try to prove to someone that they ought to be baptized, as if God said, here, you need this verse so you can convince people to be baptized. The Great Commission is not about baptism. You know what the Great Commission is about? Making followers of who? Yes, we're talking about Jesus. God. That's what we need to talk about. There may have been a time, you may have grown up in a culture where you can make this assumption. Everybody believes in Jesus. We just need to open the Bible and show them what they need to do about Jesus. Please hear this carefully. In our culture, that is no longer true, if it ever was. It's just not. Now, if you say, well, isn't there in Scripture? Yeah, you know what baptism language looks like in Scripture? Death, faith, resurrection, love, new birth. You don't hear these kind of things in Scripture about baptism. It's a step, it's an act, it's a sign. This is not written to be a baptism proof text. And somebody said, but it says if you make disciples, baptize them. Well, of course you're going to baptize people that are going to follow Jesus. Just don't get the cart before the horse. Now, I've said this, and we had some of us already had some conversation about this. If you grew up in a church that emphasized baptism, if you were not careful, what you did was assume your kids got a lot of Jesus. So we have to be sure they understand baptism. And the most important thing for our 15 kids that are growing up in this church is be sure they are all baptized. And so we ended up baptizing all 15 of them, and then wondering why we couldn't find 10 of them 10 years later. Now, I'm not saying that was intentional, but I'm much more today. We're going to do a whole lot about, let's talk about Jesus and assume everybody will be baptized, because when you talk about Jesus, that's what happens. I'm not going to teach you how to convince everybody to be baptized, assuming they had Jesus. I know that's a subtle thing, and some people are like, but I just want to be real clear about that I think the point of making a disciple is not to baptize them. The point of making a disciple is to make them a follower of Jesus. And as part of that, of course, they're going to be baptized. Now, we also probably ought to say, because it's also there, somebody says, yeah, but it's also a passage to prove we all got to know everything correctly. Because it says, teaching them to obey all things I command. So we've got to be sure everybody knows what's right about everything and does that. I've seen that used to beat people up who don't agree with your position on something. You know, Jesus said we have to teach you to obey all things. And so you're a little confused about this whole communion cup. They've got to be a big cup, or it's got to be little cups already open, or you can't have little packet cup, or whatever it is. Now, somebody says, but there is truth. But yes, there is truth about that. There is. And Scripture's real clear. There's a priority about truth. And so I'm going to tell you, everybody in this room doesn't agree on every point of doctrine. Now you're like, who doesn't agree? I will tell you this, if you're confused about any part of doctrine, just please see me afterward, I'll explain the correct one. In fact, I was so passionate about that, I told my wife, I'm tired of all these churches not agreeing. I got to figure it out. We're going to start a church. We're going to call it the church that's right about everything. And so it went really well until about 3 sentences in, she disagreed with me on something. But there are things we have to know. That's exactly right. If you will look at the book of 1 Corinthians, I don't know if you got your Bibles, I'll read them to you, but if you got them, or you want to jot them down, in the book of 1 Corinthians, chapter 15, Paul's writing to the church in Corinth. Obviously, we call it 1 Corinthians. And in the first couple of verses of that chapter, I want you to hear what Paul says. Now I would remind you, okay, what he's telling them is something he's already told them. He's reminding them, brothers, of the gospel, good news, the gospel I preached to you, which you received, in which you stand, by which you're being saved, if you hold fast to the word I preached to you, unless you believed in vain. For I delivered to you as of first importance. What else? Okay, whatever he sits and tells them is a big deal. Because when he goes through that, he says, this is where I preached to you, you received it, this is where you take your stand, this is your worldview, this is, you're being saved by this, if you hang on to it. It is of first importance. So when somebody says, okay, man, there's so much, what do I have to know? Well, here it is. I mean, this is the most important thing to know. That Christ died for our sins in accordance with the scriptures. That he was buried, that he was raised on the third day in accordance with the scriptures. There's a lot of things we think our world needs to know. How they ought to worship may be important. How they ought to live may be important. But you know the most important thing our world needs to hear? That Jesus died for their sins. He was buried, and God raised him from the dead on the third day. And you can read all about that in the scriptures. That's what our world has to know. We've sometimes kind of assumed everybody knows that and kind of skipped past it. This is the foundation of everything. This is your life. That Jesus died for your sins, he was buried, and God raised him from the dead on the third day. We just got through doing Easter when the whole world was looking at Easter stuff and talking about resurrection. We should have been all over that because that is foundational to everything we do as God's people. Yeah, but you can't just teach them that. There's something we have to do. And Scripture's real clear about priorities there too. There's a priority to that also. If you will look at Mark, the 12th chapter. Now, most of you will know this Scripture. It's recorded in several other places, not just in Mark 12. It's even several places in the Old Testament, in fact. But in Mark 12, verses 28 through 31, you will hear this. One of the scribes came up and heard them disputing with one another. Who would ever have a church fight? I mean, these God's people disputing with each other. Royal Oak has never had that problem, but there are churches that actually had disputes sometimes about things. And seeing them, he answered them well. And they asked him, which commandment is the most important of all? Okay, here you go. You want to know what you have to do? This is it. What do I have to do? And here's what Jesus said. And he's quoted the Old Testament, by the way. And so this has always been true. The most important, hear, Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The most important thing to tell anyone if they say, hey, this is really great, what do I have to do? I mean, how do you live? You love God with everything you have. You ever tried to convince somebody to do something that wasn't motivated? It's already, you have to do, I don't want to do this. Well, you have to, and man, they're not enthused about it, they don't do it well, we want people to love God. Yeah, but there's all this stuff. Trust me on this. If people don't love God, you will spend the rest of your life trying to convince them to do what God wants when they don't really want to. And I tell people, the first thing is always love God. Always. That's it? Well, no, he even gives you the second one. And the second one is, be sure you have the correct stand on this room. Wait, I misread that. The second one is, love your neighbor. Wow. So when people say, what do I have to know? That Jesus died for our sins, buried, God raised him on the third day, just like it says in Scripture. Well, what do I have to do? You have to love God with everything you have. And you have to love your neighbor as yourself. And I'm going to tell you, how does that apply to talking to people about Jesus? If you don't really love God, you don't care whether people hear about it or not. And if you don't really love your neighbor, you're not going to go out with any intentionality about telling them about Jesus. And It is hard to spend your life talking to people about God and Jesus if you don't love them. So I just always kind of do that to kind of set a foundation, because this is what we're going to spend a lot of our time today talking about. We're going to talk about how you go into your world, and I'm giving you the preview of the next sessions. The first thing we're going to do, we're going to go into our world living like forgiven people, because we're God's exhibit A for how Jesus works. Well, I'm not really perfect. Yeah, we'll talk about all of that. We will. I didn't say you go into your world living perfect. I said you go into your world living forgiven. And you do live out your forgiveness. We do. You live that out. So we're going to talk a lot about that, about showing that the Jesus way really does work to change lives. And we're going to talk about where we go. And let me give you the preview of that. Where we go is anywhere we have people in need. Financial need, emotional need, whatever, economic need, spiritual need. There are lonely people, and there are poor people, and there are hurting people, and they are everywhere in our world. And our call is to go love them just like we love ourselves. And as we serve people, we're going to do it with intentionality and purpose, because it doesn't really help them in the long run if I give them a meal and walk off and say nothing about Jesus. I fed them, and that's great. But 100 years from now, that won't matter. But if I feed them and say, by the way, can I tell you my Jesus story? Would you like to hear more about Jesus? Whatever the invitation becomes to say, can we have dialogue about? Then I may have a chance that 100 years from now, that meal mattered a whole lot. So I think it's really important that we serve intentionally. And then what we're going to do when we get there, we're going to go out living forgiven wherever people are in need. And we're going to speak boldly to people. We've got to talk to people about Jesus. It is not enough just to be a good person trying to live forgiven and be nice to them. Our call, our commission is to make followers like we are. So we've got to talk to people. And so we'll spend a little time about how you learn to talk boldly to your friends and neighbors. But I want to finish this little section by spending a little time over in Exodus. Because every time I do a seminar like this, and I mean this, I think everybody here absolutely buys into how great it would be if we could reach hundreds of people for Jesus over the next 2 or 3 years. You're here because you want our world to know about Jesus. You wouldn't be here if you didn't want our world to know about Jesus. You wouldn't come this morning. So you're into this. But there's a lot of difference of being supportive and actually doing it. I mean, Michigan's the big team up here, I assume. If you're a Michigan State person, I'm sorry, I'm going to talk about Michigan for a minute. If you go blue, big blue, whatever, yeah, okay, there you go. Okay. So, Michigan, I don't know much about winning. I'm an Arkansas Razorback fan, so it's kind of weak, But we live for baseball. There you go. One thing they do well. So you're a Michigan fan, and you're really invested. Boy, you go to the games, and you cheer, and man, you jumped up and yelled when they won. It's great, it's wonderful, and that's a lot different than being on the field. It's a lot different than being out on the field playing the game, or calling the play, or making the decision. And for a lot of us, we want to be cheerleaders for reaching people for Jesus. We don't actually want to have to go do that. And so we're going to talk a little bit about whether or not it really does have to be you that does this. Because as much as I love Peter, and I really like guys that preach, I do. I mean, I are one, so I like them. But we're never going to reach the world depending on a bunch of guys that are, quote, professionals. We can't do it. Not enough of us. We don't know the people you know. So it does, I think, involve you. And so to help illustrate that, we're going all the way back to when God called Moses to go get his people and bring them out of Egypt. Most of you will know that story. It starts with the burning bush. I've always thought, Someday I'm going to ask Moses, and I got a lot of questions for a lot of people, but I'm going to have a lot of time, so it'll be okay. I want to know what he thought when he really first saw that. A little smoke. Looks like one of the bushes is on fire. Well, I need to go be sure it's out in a minute. It's still burning. That's not that big a bush. What is going on? And as he gets closer, he sees the bushes burning but not being consumed. Now, in West Texas, where y'all think about snow, we think about fire. We have burn bans, and all ranchers go around and do stupid things like knock down trees and put them in a big pile so all the snakes it's really the mice that go in there, but mice draw snakes. And so you spend half your life making snake pits and saying to every little kid and every adult that comes around, don't go too close without wearing boots. And so periodically, what do you do to those? Burn them. And so if you've never done it, if you're not a rancher, you take your tractor, clear a big spot around it, and then you get 4 or 5 people to stand out there with brooms or shovels. You know what that's for? Yeah, when it sparks out. And if you're really good, we bring a water truck out, because all the counties where I am, they all have a water truck for ranchers to get when they burn. And you're fanatical worried about everything burning. And so you're always looking. And if you see any kind of thing that looks like smoke you run over and you put it out. And Moses couldn't do that. And I think about that a lot, about what your burning bush moment might look like for reaching people through Jesus. Maybe a sermon you heard that just says, this is it, I'm in. This is my burning bush moment. God's calling. It may be when a neighbor said, man, my life's just a mess. I wish I knew. I know. This is my burning bush moment to speak to you. Somebody at work who just comes in and tears flow out of their eyes every Monday morning, and you know something's not right. Maybe that's I don't know what your burning bush moment is. Whatever it is in your life that triggers that burning desire to share Jesus with someone. Maybe some of you will have your burning bush moment this week. I don't know. But you have that, and all of a sudden you have that holy call. Like Moses got, lead my people out of captivity. Well, that's our world out there, captive to sin. And we've got that holy call from God to help lead them through Jesus out of their sin. That's still what we talk about, breaking sin captives. Free. So Moses is going to get the take. God says, here's your holy call. And then if you read through Exodus 3 and 4, you will hear Moses' conversation when God gives him his holy call. And here's Moses' first thing. It's not, wow, thank you for this great honor. Thank you, I appreciate it. It's good. No, here's his first thing. Who am I to do this? You got your holy call to lead people, and your first thought may be, who am I to go out and tell people about it? Isn't that kind of the preacher's job, or maybe the elder's job, or maybe the people that are, I'm just a regular member. There is nothing special about me. And if you want to know the truth, I don't even always have it together for Jesus. Yeah, I get it. We've got all those, who am I? And you know what God told Moses? I will be with you. You remember then in the Great Commission when Jesus said, and I will be with you always. Yep. There it is. God's mission about Jesus, when we say, who am I? Here's the first reason that's the wrong question. Telling people about Jesus is never about you. It's not. That's right. It's never about you. I mean, the whole thing about getting to heaven is not about you. It's all about Jesus. And so it really helps me when somebody says, I don't want to listen to you. I don't care. No. Okay, you're not rejecting me. You know who they're rejecting. That's right. And if I put me in the front, and boy, let me just tell you, there's a lot of things I am and do well, but Jesus is one thing I am not. I'm a Jesus person, but I'm not Jesus. And neither are you. So let me tell you, first of all, of course, who are you? Let me tell you who you are. You're the person that's with Jesus. You're the person that got it. You know Jesus died for your sins. and he was raised from the dead on the third day. And by faith, you bought into that, and you died with him, you were buried with him, you rose with him, and you're living from him. That's who you are. Are you perfect? No, we're going to talk about that in a minute. So that's important. So after God tells him that, Moses goes, okay, what if they ask me what your name is? What do I say? Boy, Steve, that's great. You're right. It's not about me. But what if they ask me a question I can't answer? I mean, I don't know all these verses. I don't know. What if, I get it. I mean, what if they ask me a doctrinal question, I don't know the answer. What if I don't even understand the question? I get it. I know. You know what God told Moses? I am who I am. Well, that doesn't make any sense. What am I going to do if somebody asks me a question I don't know? Say, don't worry, God is in me. Yeah, you know what you say? It's always about God and Jesus. When they ask you something, sometimes they ask questions. I've been doing this all my life. I do this constantly. I teach this and I do this. When I go home, this is what I do. And I still get asked questions that I go, I don't know. I said, I literally say this sometimes to people. Listen, I don't know. I talk a lot about Jesus. I kind of don't know what you're really talking about. So I will tell you how this gets really awkward sometimes. I do a lot of funerals in Abilene for people that don't have preachers. The funeral homes know me, and so I do probably twice a month. I go do a funeral for somebody that doesn't have church. So the other day I got a call from one of the funeral homes, and they said, we have a lady that's died. Her husband wants to have the funeral here. They are Catholic. Can you do the funeral? And I said, Justin, you're talking to Steve. He said, no, I know. And I said, I'm not Catholic. And he said, I know, but they called the Catholic. She was from out of town, came back to Abilene to be buried, and said the Catholic Church said they couldn't accommodate her this week because it's Holy Week. That's incredibly ironic to me. I don't know if it's ironic to anybody else, but I thought, wow. So I said, okay, I'll do it. So I got some stuff together, did kind of one of those generic, talked about memories. We get through it, and right at the end, they're coming out and they're opening the casket, getting everything ready to view. And a guy stands up in the middle. There's about 40 people there. A guy stands in the middle and he says, we need to do the Lord's Prayer. So everybody stands up and looks right at me. So I said, okay, our Father, who art in heaven. So we do the Lord's Prayer. And then we get through and he goes, and the Holy Mary. And I went. So finally I just went. And so bless the guy's heart. He goes, Holy Mary. And then he stops. I don't know if he didn't know her. I don't know what happened. And his wife looks around and goes, Lord, great. And here they go on the Hail Mary. And people are kind of mumbling through. And she was really good at it. So I told the guy for a second, I'm sorry, but I'm not sure I don't know it. Okay, you're going to be in that, someday somebody's going to look at you, you're going to have a moment like that, and the Hail Mary, and you're going to go, the what? I don't know it, I don't think I know it. It's not, okay. Okay, you know what you do when they ask you something like that? You always talk about Jesus. Now, there's a lot of ways and a lot of applications to that. We're going to talk about a story later this morning that'll make this a little clearer, but don't get sidetracked. So what about that building y'all have? So what do y'all think about? What's your stand on? Okay, you know what? If you're not talking about Jesus, nothing matters until they love Jesus. It just doesn't. When they get to heaven, God's not going to say, here's the doctrinal test. Now, you may not have loved my son, but if you pass all 10 of these questions, you're in. Doesn't work like that. It does not work like that. Salvation is found in Jesus. So, the answer is always Jesus. In fact, I'll tell you how much I believe this. If I ask you any question this morning, if I ask a question and you have no idea what the answer is, just yell out Jesus. Now, it may not be the answer I'm looking for, but everybody's going to go, wow, that's not what he wanted, but isn't that guy smart? Boy, he yelled Jesus. That's right. The answer is always Jesus. Remember what they have to know. Jesus died for their sins. According to the scripture, he was buried and God raised him from the dead, according to the scriptures. Okay, so God tells Moses that. Then he says, first verse in Exodus 4, he says, well, what if they don't believe me? What if they don't listen to me? What if I start talking to somebody about Jesus and they don't think I'm right? What if they don't believe me when I say, hey, Jesus loves you. God sent his son to die for you. What if they don't believe me? Here's what God said to Moses. Okay, let me tell you something. Take that staff in your hand. Okay, throw it on the ground. Good, I'm messing this whole thing up anyhow. Boom. And then it becomes a snake. Okay, I'm a West Texas rancher. Snakes are a big deal. We look for them. And on our place, we have rattlesnakes because we're West Texas. And a lot of copperheads. I don't know if you know what a copperhead is. Y'all have copperheads in Michigan? Okay. Well, in the sandy part of our place, we have copperheads, and they're hard to see. And so it's not uncommon to say, oh, look what that stick's doing in the road. Oh, my. That's not a stick. It's a copperhead. You always know the rattlesnakes, by the way. You know how? Because they're rattle. Yeah, they rattle. They really, literally, they rattle. But copperheads don't. And so I get this, how Moses must have felt when he threw it down, all of a sudden the snake bite. And then you remember what God told him then? Pick it up. Okay, how many of y'all are ready to check out the whole thing there? But I love Moses, at least he does. And you know what happened to him when he picked it up? Became a staff. And then he said, now put your hand in your coat. Pull it out. I've got leprosy. Put it in. Pull it out. I don't have leprosy. And if all that doesn't work, turn water into blood. Okay, so if somebody says, if I don't think they believe me, I'm supposed to throw a staff at them? I don't get what you're saying. Here's what I'm saying. Prove it. Well, how do you prove it? By how you live. You know, when we say, hey, God loves you, and we're his people, and so, you know how they know God loves them? Because we do. That's why we're going to talk just a couple of minutes now about living forgiven. Because that's how you prove that Jesus' way works. I tell people all the time, hey, just come visit us. Want to come see how you worship? No, come visit us. When we come to worship, it's not to do church. We are church. We come together so just come hang out with us. Man, we are God's witness in this world. And so the way we live either draws people. Now, tomorrow morning, we're going to preach on this, so you're getting a preview. The way we live either brings people closer to Jesus or drives them further from Jesus. And if all that wasn't enough, you know, I'm slow of tongue. Okay, Steve, I do this. I don't meet people well. I mean, if I was you, if I were like you, I could do this all day long. No, I do believe there are people that are naturally gifted at this. I do. But there's not enough. I'm going to tell you, he said, I'm slow of tongue. I'm not a good speaker. I'm not very talented. This really is my gift. You know what God said to him? Who made you? So I'd be real careful telling God, you know, I'm really not equipped for this because I made you. I made you. And then I made you again in my son Jesus. I created you and then I created you anew when you were born again. I did that with you. Don't tell me you're not good enough, equipped enough, talented enough. God's not going to ask you to ever do something you can't. God doesn't work that way. God will never say to you, do this, and you're like, I can't. God doesn't work that way. The power is not in our ability anyway. You know what the power is? It's in God and Jesus, always. And when somebody says, well, you know, you're preaching, let me tell you, for all of us to preach, Peter will tell you this. When it goes well, it's never us. When you say great job, it's kind of like, well, thank you, but you know, it's really Jesus. But God also said, but I tell you what I'll do for you. Just take your brother Aaron. He's a good speaker. So you're saying, okay, so what? How does that work? Okay. When you get a situation, you're not sure if you can do that, you call somebody who can. You call Peter, if it's a young person, you call Sean. You call somebody who's gifted and can do that. We tell people all the time at Hillcrest, listen, if you'll host them, buy the coffee and bring them, I'll talk to them. I mean, there are people that are naturally gifted, but they don't know who you know. You're the connector. So if you set it up and say, hey, I've got a friend who, would you mind having coffee? That's great. You will hear stories today about people that did that very thing. So use the gift, the people that are gifted and work together. But after all that, here's what Moses says in Exodus 4:13. Please send somebody else. And the Lord's anger burned against Moses. All these other excuses, but God always gave an answer. Don't worry, say this. Here's this. Until he said, send somebody else. And that's when God got mad at Moses. God gets every one of your hesitations, every one of your fears, every one of your apprehensions, every one of your, I may say the wrong thing. I mean, I tell people, I tell you how powerful Jesus is and God is. I say the wrong thing all the time. I know I do. I'm too pushy or not pushy enough, or I ask at the wrong time, or I mess things up all the time when people come to Jesus like crazy, which tells me it's not about. That's right. That's right. God gets it, and he's going to help you. But do not say, please send someone else. That's not how it works. So we're going to talk a little bit about going into this world living forgiven. Because one of the things people say, I don't know, because my family, they know me better than anybody. The people I work with, they know all my problems. The people that, I get it. So the point is not to say, hey, find Jesus, you'll be perfect like me. Or, hey, if you listen to me, you can be just like me. Let me tell you, nobody wants to be like me. They don't. But you know who I want to be like? And you know who the people I talk, you know who I want them to be like? There you go. You get it. So, but before I do, let me say a word about, we have books at the back. What you say they are? $100? $10. $10 a book. And the church bought them, so I don't even get that. So, but I will tell you what, $10, you get one of those books back there that I think all three of mine are back there. Yeah, the Followers Making Followers, which is where a lot of this material, it's not exactly the same because this is always evolving and changing. And I get different conversion stories every week or two because we reach people. And there's one called, Can I Tell You a Story, that actually gives stories you can use to talk to people. And the third one is one called Wounds into Scars. It's written for people who love Jesus and can't get past their stuff. I love Jesus, but I keep doing, I can't quit, I can't get over, I can't feel forgiven. And the people that love them and want to help them. And so it's not an autobiography, but it's a lot of autobiography. It's got a lot of me in it. And so those are all there. But I tell you what, even though I'm not going to get a dime from this, if they're $10, if you want to give 100 to the church, I'll sign it for you. If you want to give 1,000 to the church, I will carry it to your car. If you want to give 10,000 to the church, I'll come over and read it this afternoon to you. I would be glad. I'd be happy to sign them, and that, by the way, is a discount. I think they're really 14. This is why nobody lets me handle money. They say, go sell your books. I'm like, okay. They say, how much is it? I don't know, 13, 14, 15. I don't know. What do you got? And then I literally, if I ever take them and do this, I come back to our financial. She loves me. She does. We go to church together. I come in and go, here's the money I got. She's like, how many did you sell? Yeah, I don't know. Well, how much do you sell them for? I just kind of told everybody what I thought it was. And she'll total it up and go, according to this, you sold 23 and an 8. I'm like, well, I don't know how I did that. Or apparently you sold 3 and you took 20. Well, I don't know. So, but I will tell you that. So we're going to go into our world and we're going to live forgiven. Because that's how people know that Jesus' life really works. There's a story in the first part of John 8. Most of you know it's a famous story because it's just so raw. About the woman who was caught in adultery. Now, somebody says, wait, in John 8, when I look at that, it's kind of got a little footnote that says it wasn't in some of the earliest manuscripts. What does that mean? Well, it can mean a couple of things. If it wasn't in the earliest manuscripts, then it may not originally have been in the text. Well, how did it get there? Well, some scribe writing along and for whatever reason writes the story in. Okay, but it doesn't stop there because it starts getting copied everywhere. And it's all over. So here's what I think probably happened if it wasn't in the original text. Some guy wrote it in and said, what? Why? That's the greatest story Jesus did. Why is that not in there? And he writes, and everybody, the next guy copying it doesn't think about it because he knows the story is probably true. Maybe he knew the story. And so he copied. So if somebody says, you mean you think there are things Jesus did not in Scripture? Well, yeah, I do. Kind of because John, at the end of the Gospel of John, says if we wrote down everything Jesus did, the world wouldn't hold the books. So do I think there are a lot of things Jesus did? Yeah. Do I think everything in Scripture had a purpose and was written for a reason? Absolutely. Because they didn't write everything. So I think it's probably an authentic story that may not have been in the original inspired text, but it's probably something Jesus did. And so I tell this story a lot. Jesus is teaching at the temple, and some of the religious leaders bring in a woman caught in adultery. Now, I'm going to quick step through all these stories. So if you're going to tell these or work on these, you need to go back and be sure you know these. But I'm just going to quick step through this because there's a lot we don't know. I mean, I'm not real good at math, but they brought the woman who was caught in adultery. What's missing? The guy! Yeah, where's the guy caught in adultery? I don't know if they busted in and said, "Oh, John, I didn't know it was you." Out the back window quick. I don't know if the whole thing was set up. I don't know why. I don't know if she thought she was in love. I don't know if he was a married guy. I don't know if it was a one-night stand. I don't know if they were at the Camel Bar the night before and she got drunk and woke up and went on. I don't know what all happened. I don't know why. I don't know who. There's a lot of things we don't know. But I do know this. I can only imagine how she felt. I mean, tomorrow morning, we're in the middle of church, and your guys would never do this. But your elders dragged this woman in and said, "Hey, Steve, we just caught this woman in adultery." Hi, everybody. Glad to meet you. Or does she know them all? Or is she defiant? Hey, it's none of your business, and who are you to? Or is she just like a whipped puppy? Worst, I did something really bad, and they're broadcasting it to the whole church. Hey, did you see the bulletin last week? Your face was on it. It said, the shame, the humiliation, the guilt. And it's really not even about her because you remember what they say. Okay, Jesus, the law says stone her. What do you say? Because they wanted to trap Jesus. If he says, "Oh, yeah, well, that's what the Bible says, stone her." Wait, I thought you came because you loved us. Well, I mean, I do. Okay, don't stone her. Oh, you don't believe the Bible? They thought they had Jesus. And so he gets around it by doing this. He starts writing in the dirt. And yes, when I get to heaven, I'm finding out. I am. I want to know. Because Scripture doesn't say what he wrote. And then he said, "Whoever's without sin, let me cast the first stone." And I hear this all the time, so nobody there could. Yeah, there was somebody there that could have. Of course they could have. You know who could have thrown the first stone? Jesus, because he had no sin. When he said that he was without sin, he's saying there's nobody here but me can throw that stone. That's what. And I don't know what he wrote. I don't know if he wrote to the woman, "I love you." I don't know if he wrote to them, "I love you." I don't know if he started writing their names down. Peter did this. Simon did this. Yeah, I don't know what he was. I don't know what he was doing, but he's writing in the dirt. And when he says, "Let him without sin cast the first stone," now, we're really hard on those guys. We are really hard on those guys. But I'm going to give them credit for one thing. When they figure it out, they get it. And the old guy figured it out first. The oldest one there turned around and walked away. I love churches that finally figure it out and then do something about it. So he says, "Anybody left here to condemn you?" Nope. No one, Jesus in me either. That's such a contrast. Our world doesn't get that. We are not doing this, and we're not here because we're so much better than everybody out there. There are good moral people who are better moral people than some of us sometimes. That's true. And we're not here because God looked around and said, "Oh, you're really good. You get in. Oh, you're really good. You can make it. you're not so good, but you're going to get really good. So come on, eat. That's not how it works. None of that is how it works. The world always says, boy, let me expose every bad thing you did. Let me let you feel a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of condemnation. And Jesus says, I'm here about love and mercy and grace. Such a contrast. So he says, I'm not going to condemn you either. And then he says, go and sin no more. So we go into our world, not because we're perfect. We go into our world saying we are forgiven and we are trying to sin no more. I mean, some of you have been Christians long enough to see how God has grown you spiritually. Now, I know somebody says, boy, I still battle my demons and I haven't. Yeah, yes, you are. I get it. We're going to talk about that, especially one night for our visitors. We're going to talk about the things that haunt us and we have to battle against. Well, most of us are so much better than we were. When somebody said, you Christians are a bunch of hypocrites, I'm like, oh, you should have seen this before Jesus. Because without Jesus, you know how most of you would be. You just think about it a little bit. Well, I'd still be a pretty good person. Pretty good doesn't cut it. That's not the point. So, we go into our world living forgiven, not perfect, but we're getting better. And that is the point. Living forgiven is getting better. I want to think because of Jesus, we are better mates, we are better parents, we are better friends, we are better neighbors, we are better citizens. We are better because of Jesus in our life. And that's the point. But everybody knows the story of David and Bathsheba. He's the king. Everybody goes to war except David didn't. David wasn't where he's supposed to be, and he wasn't doing what he's supposed to do. And that's always how you get in trouble, by the way. That's a freebie. It's in the wounds and the scars. I'm giving you that for free. If you want to watch yourself, be where you're supposed to be and do what you're supposed to do. When you quit those two things, that's when Satan works on you. And of course, he sees Bathsheba. And for all the guys in here, I'm going to tell you, boy, David never had a chance. She's out there flaunting herself on the roof. She's bathing where you can see her. Man, it's all her. Poor David never had a chance. Okay, for all the ladies in here, her husband's at war. She's not even thinking. And that lecherous king is up there staring around till he spots her. And, you know, I suspect you had two vulnerable people that Satan said, oh, yeah, here you go. Brush pile, little gas, let me throw the match. That's exactly that's how Satan works. He takes a depressed, lonely king who's not being kingly, and he takes a woman whose marriage is probably not real good, and husband's away at war. That's how Satan works. So, and if I was doing, it's in the wounds and the scars, if I was doing the whole David lesson, I would just say he had a lot of chances to get off that road, by the way. Who is that? Bless some servant's heart who said, you know, that's the daughter of the wife of, you know, she's married. Well, whoever that was a courageous guy. And then he says, here's a note. And then she answers it. And then they slept together, which really doesn't mean sleep. So, and then she gets pregnant. You know the whole story. Wow. And eventually David writes about his sin. And it is found in the 51st Psalm. So I think it applies to all of us who have struggled with our sin. We're supposed to be following God. Now, y'all may not struggle with sin in your lives. Of course we do. Most of us are doing way better at it than we used to. And we're going to keep doing better. But I'm just going to highlight some of the things David mentions when thinking about it. He talks about God's mercy and love. He uses phrases like, blot out my sin, wash my sin, cleanse me from my sin. I know what I've done. Wash me, I'll be whiter than snow. Hide your face from my sins. Create a clean heart and renew a right spirit. Do not take away your Holy Spirit. Restore to me the joy of your salvation. Okay, quick time out. We've got to also be happy people in this world. I mean, I don't want people to come to our worship assemblies and think they'll walk into a pew. if anything, I'd rather them think, well, they could worship like a party around here. You know, if you knew what God had done for us, you'd party too. You would. And we got to quit looking like we were baptized in pickle juice. We're going to heaven and live forever. We ought to celebrate that all the time. So, when you say they're a little too exuberant, and you don't have to be like me, by the way. You do not have to be like me. And we'll talk a little more in a minute. I'm just going to tell you, he says, restore to me the joy of my salvation. And then this is a phrase we don't talk about much. He says, then I will teach sinners your ways, and they will return to you. Please forgive me, and because you have been so good to me, I am going to go tell others about your forgiveness. For those of you that get how much God's forgiven you and how great a gift you have in Jesus, man, that's your life mission. I don't care what you do for a living. I don't care what you do for a hobby. Your life mission is to be sure other people know what you know. I will sing and speak your praise. God forgives us so we can help others see and receive that forgiveness. So that's my friend Ken Jones. Ken's now in his late 80s, and he's getting senile, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about Ken's story. Ken was baptized as an early teenager, but it didn't take. I mean, he says it didn't. I was in and out, dried off, and that was it. But he married a faithful Christian. Ken worked most of his life. Abilene was dry for a long time, and he was one of the last guys to bootleg liquor into Abilene. Ran around gangs. He will tell you he broke every one of the 10 Commandments, but one, because the gun misfired. And then he came back. Decided his wife finally convinced him to come back to church. He was baptized for real and stuck with it. So when he was about 60, it's been almost 20, a little over 20 years, he called me one day, and we were going to church, not at Hillcrest, but another church then, and he said, can I come meet with the elders? I said, yeah. When I was an elder, I said, yeah, love to have you. Come on in. Okay, I'm not a good administrative kind of elder guy either. Probably the proper thing was call and say, hey, we got Ken coming in. But I said, yeah, bring him, come on in. So he comes in, and they were all, there were about, I don't know, 18 of us then maybe. And he said, yeah, come on in, Ken. What do you want to do? And Ken says, you guys know I'm an alcoholic. Well, I knew, and 2 or 3 of us knew, but most of them did. They were great. They were all like, okay, you're forgiven. He said, no, I'm not asking about that. Oh, okay, what are you asking? I said, there's a lot of people like me out there, a lot of alcoholics. Okay. And he said, I want them to come to church and learn about Jesus, but they don't feel welcome here. Well, I don't know if that's right. I think they, okay, maybe. So we talked about that a little bit. And then he says, so I think we need to go where they are. Yeah, Jesus did. And then he said, he just blurts this out. He says, so I want to start a church at a bar. Okay, later, I give great credit to those guys that were elders there, because most of them went, okay. Later, they said, I want to go, what do you think? Don't get, what do you think? But they said, okay. And then later, some of them said, we said yes, because who's going to let him do church in a bar? So we all prayed over it and said, God bless you. Y'all know me enough by now, because I can get a little carried away. So when he says it, I'm like, that's a great idea. And so he leaves, and one of them said, we'll never hear from him again about that. He came in the next week and said, guess what? What? He said, I ran into a lady I know, the waitresses at one of the bars, and I told her what I wanted to do, and she said, I think my owner will let you do that. And so I called him, and he said, yeah, we have to do it Sunday before they open. They open until noon. And we're going to serve alcohol as soon as it's over, but he said we could have church there before noon if we wanted to. And by the way, they did. By the way, that it's kind of ironic the bar closed down about a year later. And a lot of people got messed up on that because they thought the cool thing was to say, hey, we have a church in a bar. And they thought the cool thing was, and everybody said, ooh, I want to work in that until about the 3rd week working with addicts. And then it was like, I don't want to do this. But some stuff with it, here's the neat thing, over the last 10 years, there have been dozens upon dozens baptized into Christ at that place. Our best evangelist is a football coach who in the summer drives the bus to pick them up at different places and bring them to the bar church. Here's how he evangelizes. Hey, how's it going? Well, I can't see my kids. And he says, yeah, I know my life was all messed up, so I got married and found Jesus. Well, life's really good now. Really? Well, how'd you do that? He said, well, Jesus died for my sins. I died with him. We call it baptism, was raised to kind of a new life, and that's pretty cool. And they go, can I do that? He's like, sure, when do you want to? And they're like, well, how soon can I? And then we have to say, wait, stop and spend the next 3 weeks explaining more carefully. Hey, they got it. Jesus died for my sins. I die with him. Can I do that? And so he reaches a lot of people that way. But here's what I want you to hear. It's because a forgiven sinner wanted to not just live as forgiveness, but wanted other people to know about Jesus. Well, yeah, that's a great story for now. Okay, let me give you one from the Bible. We're going to do this. We're going to quick step this one too. But Philip and Stephen, early preachers together. They were having some trouble in the early church. Some of the widows weren't getting taken care of. They looked for spiritual men full of the Holy Spirit. And it lists the 7 guys they picked. First 2 it mentions Stephen and Philip. So they were good friends. I figured that everybody needs preaching buddies. I've got guys I'm just good friends with who are preaching buddies. Preachers have kind of that connection because that's what we do. And so I think they were probably good friends. And Stephen was such a powerful preacher. The Jewish leaders who did not believe that Jesus was the Messiah promised wanted to stop him. I mean, from their view, he's preaching false truth about God. Jesus was not the Messiah. We've got to stop this. And so they ended up so enraged at Stephen. Do you remember what happened to him? They stoned him to death. You know who the guy that was leading most of that was? A guy named Saul, who was, in fact, Saul was kind of egging them on and said, hey, listen, if you can't throw your rocks good enough, let me hold your coat for you. You know. And then Saul persecuted Christians all over. Had them thrown in jail, confiscating property. I'm sure some of them died. And he's on his way to Damascus to prosecute Christians. And you remember what happened? Jesus showed up. Bright, blinding light. Why are you persecuting me? Why are you kicking against me? Lord, what do you want? Go to Damascus and pray, and someone will come tell you. 3 days later, that had to be the longest 3 days of Saul's life. Ananias shows up, baptizes, commissions him to go preach to the Gentiles. And Saul becomes Paul, the famous apostle, to the Gentiles. He goes on preaching trips. So if you'll read in Acts 21, Paul and Silas are on a mission trip. And they're getting ready to go to Caesarea. And it says this, they stayed at the house of Philip the evangelist. Well, yeah, okay, they didn't have a Hampton Inn, so okay, they stayed at the house. No, they stayed, Paul, who used to be Saul, stayed at the house of Philip. Are you getting the connection yet? So I imagine when they said, hey, Philip, we're going to host some traveling evangelists, stay at your house. Yeah, it'd be great. Who's coming? Silas and Paul, the Apostle Paul used to be called Saul. Yeah. Because I figure every time Philip preached, he probably thought about his buddy Stephen. You know he did. And you know he didn't forget who killed his best friend. You don't forget those things. Wow. And I wonder what Paul thought when they said, hey, we're going to Caesarea, we're staying with Philip. Is that the same Philip used to be in Jerusalem and ended up down in Samaria? Yeah. Because don't you know every time Paul preached, he thought about Stephen and that powerful sermon that killed him. And in that little verse, they stayed at the house. We don't only live forgiven. We live as the people that extend forgiveness. We got to be forgivers and forgiven both. And I wonder when that knock on that door came and everybody comes in, Philip's hugging everyone. I wonder Paul hung back. I wonder if when he got to him, Paul said, "Hey, Philip, I'm so sorry." And I suspect Philip probably said, "Brother Paul, I'm so proud of how far you've come, what Jesus has done for you, and what you're doing for him with others. Please come to my home." Because it's not enough to tell sinners, Jesus died for your sin. Okay, but if I show up, I mean, everybody in town knows how I am, and you know how I am, and what are they going to think, and how are they going to do, and what. So at Hillcrest, we're God sending a lot of ex-offenders, addicts. We're getting in the fringe. They're showing up, and then when we reach one of them, they bring all their friends, and so we're getting a significant number. And a lot of them say, and they wonder, if they don't say it, they eventually get around to it. What's everybody going to think? Because here's how I am, here's who I am, and so we've had to do some work on that whole, we don't tell people they're forgiven. We have to live extending forgiveness, which means even among ourselves, when we hurt each other, we got to forgive. Because I don't want to be part of a family, if I ever make a mistake, it's going to kick me out, and the only way I get back to the family dinner is if somebody throws a leftover out the window. We got to be willing to say, yes, you're forgiven. And yes, we love you. And then help them learn how to live forgiven. We got to be that. And one of the great evangelists in the book of Acts, you get excited for what's happening. You got that great story about Peter in Luke 5. It's mentioned, it's written a couple other places. But you remember Jesus preaching in Peter's boat. Now, you remember Peter was a professional what? Fisherman. And remember in this story, he had fished all night. How much money did he make? None. He lost money because he was out working. He didn't catch a fish. Nothing. And so he's on the shore, and they're cleaning up their nets and getting everything ready. And Jesus comes and says, "Hey, put me out in your boat. Let me preach." So the guy that's fished all night gets out on the nice, gently rocking water and listens to a sermon. Peter is my hero if he stayed awake. I'm just telling you. That's incredible. And then he gets through and he says, "Okay, let's go out for a catch. Not let's go fishing." Jesus says to Peter, "Let's go for a catch." You got to love Jesus. I don't know if Jesus was saying thank you, if that was his way of paying boat rental, or I don't know, because I'm not Jesus, but I just know he said, "Let's go get a catch." I love Peter. Well, we fished all night. Didn't catch anything. I'm kind of a pro. I don't want to embarrass for everybody. They're not there today. But because it's you, I'll go. There's a whole lot of that that's real powerful. I mean, we sometimes want to protect Jesus, protect God. He doesn't need our protection. He protects us. We don't ever confuse the thing. So, but it's obvious, and they go out there and let down their nets. Remember what happens? They catch so much and start to pull them in, the nets start coming apart. And then they start dumping them in the boat. They get their partners, bring their boats, and they put so many fish in, the boat start to sink. And Peter says all this, and he says, "Man, I can pay off my boat. I can buy another boat. I'm going to give 10%. Now, you know what Peter did? Got on his knees and asked Jesus to get away from him. Now you're like, "Well, why?" Because he was so overwhelmed by the power of Jesus. So who are people like us to be partnering with Jesus, telling the whole world that he died to save them? I get Peter's deal. Y'all don't really know. I mean, y'all know me, but I come up for anybody for a week. Come to Abilene and ask people, then you'll know me. But I always wonder if everybody really knew us for who we really were without Jesus. What's Jesus thinking with the church? I love Royal Oak, but look at you guys. What's Jesus thinking? Why get a bunch of people like you and say, "Hey, tell this neighborhood about me"? You could do a little better if you find, I get it. Believe me, I get it. that Jesus would love us enough to die for us, and that God would trust us. But you know why we're so good at it? Because we get it. We know what God did for us. So Jesus not only doesn't leave, they go to shore, and here's basically, you put all the accounts together, and here's basically what Jesus says to Peter. Don't be afraid. This is a scary thing. It is, but don't be afraid. Follow me, and we'll catch men. So I'm telling you, don't be afraid. Follow Jesus, and he's going to use you to catch men. And it's appropriate because we do get it. So a couple more things, and we'll be ready for break here in a minute. In the book of 1 Peter, you've got Peter, the guy that's, get away from me, I'm a sinner. Peter, the priest at Pentecost, he becomes an elder. He writes a letter, and it's 1 Peter and then 2 Peter, but we're going to look a minute at 1 Peter because I want you to hear some things that Peter says about living forgiven in this world. In chapter 2, verses 9 and 10, here's something to us about living in this world as forgiven people. You're a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people of his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Once you were not a people, now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. We're a royal priesthood. We're a holy nation. You think that we're fixing to elect the president of our nation? Nah, not your nation. We're electing the president of the nation where you live. This is not your kingdom. This is not your nation. We belong to the kingdom of God. That's our real kingdom. You're like, yeah, but you can love America. Yes, you can. And you can say America's the greatest country in the world, just like I know Texas is the greatest state in the world. And West Texas is not far the best part of Texas. And right out in a little bitty place, there's a ranch that's the best part of West Texas. You know, don't confuse where you live, what kingdom you belong to. So we are a holy nation, brought from darkness into light. Mercy people, to proclaim his excellencies. So how do I start living forgiven? How do you start reaching people? Everywhere you go, talk about what God's doing for you. Hey, I hear you had a good weekend. Yeah, it's great. God really blessed me. Hey, I hear you got a promotion. Yeah, God. I mean, you work like crazy. Oh, I work hard, but God did. Really? Hey, I hear you got good news from the doctor. Yeah, God healed me. Really? Yeah, can I tell you when I believe that? Ooh, I hear you got bad news from the doctor. Yeah, but it's going to be okay because of God, because of Jesus. It'll be okay. What do you mean? He gave you 6 months. I'm never going to die. We got to learn to start saying things. Man, don't you ever let come out of your mouth these words. Yeah, I sure was lucky. No, you weren't. No, you weren't. God. But man, you could have been killed. You sure are lucky. No, God spared you. Now, somebody said, well, how do you know that was always God? I don't know, but I'd sure rather give God the credit than blame luck when it was really God who saved. Man, we need to talk about all the great things God's doing in our world, in our church. Hey, I was weekend. It was great. I went to church, and they start to roll your eyes and say, man, I saw Bill, and 6 months ago they told us he was dying, and there he was. What happened? We think God healed him. What? I sat behind Bill and Sue, and boy, a year ago I thought Sue was going to kill him. And they were sitting there holding hands, and wow. We got to start telling the excellencies. Now, somebody says, well, you want us to just go around all the time going, praise Jesus, praise God. Yeah, probably I do. Now, you don't have to be for that. You don't have to go down the road, listen to praise music with both hands in the air. Keep one on the wheel. But we do need the people that are always talking about how great God's going to be, how great he has been. He can be for them what he has been for us. We need to be telling every day to anybody who will listen, how great is our God, and here's why. If you can just learn to say, here's what God is doing for me. Here's what God has done for me. If we just learn to start saying that, it will change everything. Because somebody's going to say, so why do you think that? There's your chance, because Jesus died for me, because God raised him from the dead. I died with him. He raised me to a new life, and he takes care of me. And not perfect, but boy, is my life good because. I don't know how the ways you'll say it, but you need to learn to talk about what God is doing in your life. And then verses 11 and 12 of 1 Peter 2. Beloved, I urge you as sojourners and exiles to abstain from the passions of the flesh, which wage war against your soul. Keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable, so when they speak against you as evildoers, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day of visitation. Let me say real quick, live your forgiveness. Don't be like the world. Don't give in to the passions of the world. Live your forgiveness, because we are different. We're sojourners. We're just passing through this world. This world really is not our home, and we don't say that enough. When they listen to us, when non-believers or believers say things like this, I don't know what this world's coming to. It's horrible. We've got to change things, man. I just don't know if this, I'm so worried about the world my kids are going to grow up in. When they hear us doing that, and then we say, oh, by the way, you want to come hear about Jesus? Because really everything's great. Now, you say everything's, we need to learn this. When they say that to us, we need to learn to say, yeah, I wish a lot of things were different, but you know what? It's going to be okay. How can you say that? Because I believe in Jesus. I know it's going to be okay. I know it's going to be okay, because we are strangers here. And then in chapter 3, verse 15, and then we'll tell you one story, and then we're going to break. And in chapter 3, verse 15, you've got Peter saying this, except I think I have a copy of my Bible and pictures and stuff. Okay, well, when it says, set apart Jesus as Lord for a little bit, if I go ahead and open this. I should not drink coffee out there when I get the Bible. Okay, here's what he says. But in your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy. Okay, reaching people always starts with your conversion first. Can't bring somebody where you're not. One of the problems is having some people, and when I talk about raising your kids, I never want to pour salt in anybody's wound, because it's hard when your kids aren't where you want them to be spiritually. But one thing that we tell a lot of our parents, kids, don't tell your kids what to do. Don't try to drive your kids. You lead your kids. You hope your kids line up behind you. And so you be faithful. Greatest way to be sure your kid's faithful is you be faithful. So to all parents and grandparents, my best admonition is you be where you're supposed to be. And maybe they will see that. So always be prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you the reason for the hope that is in you, yet do it with gentleness and respect. You got to always be ready, because someday you're going to be talking about Jesus. You're going to find somebody, and someday somebody's going to say to you, do you really believe that? I do. Can I buy you a cup of coffee and tell you why? Hey, why don't you come to church Sunday? We're talking about, hey, I'd love to introduce you to my friends who. I don't know where it goes from there, but you've always got to be ready when they say, how can you say, you're dying. How can you say it's going to be okay? You better be prepared, which is why you do things like this and the things y'all do and things you talk about. So you're ready when the opportunity comes. You're ready to say something about Jesus, but always do it with gentleness and respect. When they say, that's a bunch of hooey, I wouldn't believe that. You are full of it. Okay, I don't argue with people. When they say, well, I don't believe that, that's just your view. I say, well, yeah, I mean, here's why it's kind of my view. Right there, and I believe the Bible. That's kind of it. But if you don't agree, because you know what? My fight's not with people. People in this world, they're not my enemy. Jesus, God made them and Jesus died for them. My enemy is Satan, who's deceived them and led them far away from God. And so I don't ever, I'm gentle, I respect people, and they say, well, I mean, that's fine for you, it's not for me. Okay, if you ever want to talk more, I'd love to visit with you more. I don't know. So, one last story. Oh, well, maybe I just killed it. Okay, is it going back? Okay, what do I need to do? Okay, technology, I'm on it, baby. Oh, wait a minute. I'm getting close. Yes. Okay. Oh, yeah, that's worked well. Here you go. Yeah, I believe, oh boy, I can't believe I'm gonna say this. I'm believing in Peter to do this. Can he do this? The elders are meeting in the back, by the way. Don't get nervous. Okay, the minute you get to Leon, let me go ahead and start telling you Leon that story. Okay. Juliana's story starts with a guy named Gary Rice. Gary was baptized as a teenager, stayed faithful all the way through his teens, went away to college, and when he went to college, he left Jesus at home. And he says he spent 50 years, he says, he spent doing wine, women, and song. He said, I didn't care about Jesus. I made a lot of money. I spent a lot of money. I chased money. And then he married a Christian lady. She came to church. Gary was not going to come to church. When I was an elder over at Southern Hills in Abilene, she would come, but Gary never showed up. We went out and had coffee a couple of times and said, I'll talk about golf. I'll talk about anything, but I will not talk about Jesus. Okay, so we ended up over at Hillcrest and on staff there, and Gary's wife, Jana, was going to church at Hillcrest then. We talked to her, how's Gary? Oh, he's good, you know. I called Gary and said, hey, guess what? We're going to church with your wife. Okay, you want to have coffee? Yeah, sure. I want to talk about Jesus. Well, maybe we don't have to. He said, that's always why you call me. So I just said, you're right. And so we went and had coffee. And when we were getting through with coffee that time, I just said, by the way, Gary, you know, it's such a shame your wife sits by herself every Sunday. Okay, I'm going to give him credit. He looks around and says, well, what's the matter with all you Christians who are supposed to be so welcoming? Why don't you sit with her? So I said, perhaps I misspoke. She doesn't sit literally by herself because my wife sits with her different. I mean, people sit with her. But I said, but I know she would like to sit with her husband. So he calls me a couple weeks later and says, okay, I don't want you to get shot. I'm coming to church Sunday. I said, really? He said, yeah, you implied I was a bad husband because I didn't come to church with my wife. And I said, no, I kind of implied you're a bad person. I said, no, I'm kidding, Gary. I said, yeah, it will mean the world to her for you to come to church. So he started coming to church with her. So we start having breakfast together. Okay, now Gary has a lot of money. This is our breakfast. He invites me to the country club in Abilene. So I drive in and they lay it out and he pays for all of it. He says it doesn't cost him much. I don't care. I just say, thank you. Can we come again tomorrow? No. Every couple of weeks we meet. So eventually he starts asking questions about Jesus, about what it would look like if he decided to believe in him, what it would look like if he came home. He tells people that I was relentless. There's a song, some of you know, Ghost Riders in the Sky, where they come by in the stampede and say, you better get it together because, he said, you're my ghost rider. You always, all you want to do is tell me I need to get it together for Jesus. Because it's kind of the most important thing there is. So, within one day, we're sitting there and he said, you know what, it's really pretty easy, isn't it? What? He said, all I got to do is decide to come home. And then I got to decide it again every day. And then maybe during the day, I got to decide several times. But really, all I really have to do is decide to come home. Because we've been reading how Jesus seeks the lost sheep. We've been reading the prodigal son, what it means to come to your senses, all that stuff. So he said, okay, I'm going to come back. He said, there's one problem. Okay, what? He said, I got to get a whole new circle of friends. Okay. I said, you know about the country club here who goes to church at Hillcrest? He said, yeah, I know a couple of them. I said, they'll be at our next breakfast. And so we started having, there's 4 of us now that have breakfast pretty regularly, go out with our wives about once a quarter. Gary really came back. So in the middle of all this, he's coming back to Jesus. He gets a phone call from Uliana, who is a Russian lawyer who practices in Russia, Texas and California. And she said, I'm Juliana, I'm dating your son. And Gary said, I've spoken to my son in 30 years. She said, I know, but I would like to meet y'all. Can I come to Abilene and meet you? He said, yes, we'd love to host you. Please come in, and if you stay over, we go to church on Sunday morning. Would you go to church with us? And she said, I would. So they come. She comes to church that Sunday morning, and I meet her, and we talk to her. And we said, if you ever want to know more about Jesus, please, we'd love to visit. And so over the next several months, we texted and emailed Bible verses and stories for her to look at. She'd ask questions, we'd answer them. One day she texted me and said, hey, I'm going to be in the Metroplex, Dallas-Fort Worth area. That's a couple hours from Abilene. Do you think there's any way we could visit? And I said, you tell us when and where, and we'll be there. So we drove in from Abilene to Starbucks, 9 o'clock in the morning, and spent 3 hours at Starbucks talking about Jesus. My wife says, I guess you know the whole Starbucks crowd heard about Jesus. I'm like, I was loud, and she said, honey, when you're quiet, you're loud. Maybe Starbucks needed Jesus, so it's okay. So Ileana thanked us. We left. And then one day she calls Gary and said, what made you come back to Jesus? Because I know your son talks about how you were. And I saw you in church. And so Gary talked about his journey home. She said, okay, I'm coming into Abilene. I'm going to drive in. I got to drive right back because I'm flying back to California. He said, I'm coming in so you can baptize me. Gary wouldn't do it. But I did in the country club swimming pool, which was kind of cool. That, all these people are kind of around. Here we are. And that's Juliana, that's me. And that's actually, I'm meeting my wife. That's my wife standing on the other side of Juliana. At some point, you got to talk about what you want to do for Jesus. You got to tell somebody. And someday you're going to be talking, and they're going to say something to you like, is this real? I mean, he just invited her to church because she was coming in a messed up relationship, and he invited her to church. And then we shared Jesus. It took a year or two planting and watering seeds, all because Gary came home and begged his forgiveness and spoke boldly about it. And the coolest thing, one thing I love about Facebook, about 3 weeks after her baptism, she does a whole Facebook thing with pictures. And this is when I was born again, and I now have new life. I don't know where all that goes, but who knows? Where do I go when I want to go into my world? And here's the key. You go wherever there are people that have needs. That's where you go. And when he said, love your neighbors yourself, now somebody's going to say, yeah, so you're talking about feeding the hungry. Yes, those kind of things are great, but we're going to talk about how you do that with intentionality and purpose. And there is a reason we do those things. Number one, because, Jesus told us to. And number two, because that does open doors to talk about Jesus, but only if we say something about Jesus. So I want to start with the story that you all know. It's the story of the Good Samaritan. It's out of Luke 10. It's told to illustrate. Okay, I'm going to be general here, but there's always someone. Love your neighbors yourself. Love your neighbors. What's a pretty broad? I mean, I want to justify how I want to live. So I'm just going to say, who's my neighbor? And see, that way I can, if I just set up Jesus' commands so they fit what I want to do. Go into all the world and make disciples. Now, what does it really mean to go into all the world? Define world. So when they do the neighbor thing, Jesus tells this story. Now, I don't know what he's really looking at. It's kind of like going to all the world and make disciples. And we're going to serve with purpose. So does that mean my neighbor? Okay, the people I know in my neighborhood? I mean, that house, somebody just moved in. I don't know who they are. So, it's not them. I mean, my block goes here and then it turns. So do I have to, what about the people I can't even see? Are they my neighbor? I mean, they're work friends. That's not really a neighbor. I mean, what does Jesus mean by neighbor? And so Jesus just says, let me tell you who a neighbor is. And then he tells the story of the Good Samaritan. The man that was beaten and robbed. Now, you've heard this story already. A lot of y'all know this story backward and forward. The first thing is, whose fault is that? What happened? that a guy gets beaten up like that? Was he at the bar the night before flashing a roll of cash? They set him up. Did he travel by himself when everybody that's got any sense knows you don't travel by yourself on that road? Was he at the wrong time? Did they have a trap laid out? He saw it and went to help, and then they jumped him. And here's the point: we don't know. So when we start talking, we got to be real careful as believers that we don't just try to decide who's worthy of being helped. Because what if God had done that when he sent Jesus to die? Here goes Jesus, son, go down there and die for him, her. That would skip that whole road there. And go. Would you have been on the worthy list? And by the way, the answer to that is no, of course you wouldn't have. None of us would have been on the worthy list. So I'd say be real, and yes, I get that a lot of people in trouble did it to themselves. I get that. I mean, I know none of you in your life have ever done something that really was, kind of got you in trouble and your fault. It was always somebody else, right? I don't know. And I think that's part of the point. Jesus didn't tell us to say, you need to know who we need to help and who we. The point of this is not being, and I'm all for being wise about helping people, but let me make this clear too. I'd rather get to heaven and God say, geez, you threw away more money and wasted more money. You tried to help you. Didn't you not have a brain? I'd rather have that discussion with God than this one. Well, I gave you all this money. I'm glad to see you got it all. Where is it? Oh, you left it all down there where you didn't give it to anybody. Well, but I don't know. And we've all done this, help somebody, and later, the point of this is not who deserves it, or Jesus would have explained that better. I'm going to quick step through this stuff, so hang in there. 2 religious leaders came by, and they both saw the man and crossed on the other side. And we don't know why. I don't know why. I don't know if they were in a hurry. Maybe they had an elder deacon meeting to go to. I don't know. Maybe he was supposed to preach at 9:45 and it was 9:30, and he said, I don't have time to. I don't know. I don't know if they were too busy. I don't know if they looked at him but didn't really see him. Now, there's another bum on the road. I don't know. I don't know if they just didn't care. I don't know if they were being smart. You know what? That's how they trap people. That's how they trap people. So if I go over there, we're going to get beaten up and robbed, so I will be safe. Maybe he was carrying the church's money. I don't know. I just know that when they looked, they didn't really see him, and it didn't affect them at all. Either they didn't see or didn't care. And they went around the other side. And the Samaritan stopped. Okay, now real quick, you do know he's telling a bunch of Jews the story. And Jews hated Samaritans, Samaritans hated Jews. Oh yeah, kind of like race relations in our country now. No, you're not even close. Now, let me tell you how bad Jews despise Samaritans. If you were in Judea in the south, and you wanted to go to Galilee in the north, Samaria is right in the middle. And the Jordan River comes down the side of it. And you would go up Judea until you got to the border of Samaria, and you would cross the Jordan and go up the other side, and then cross back into Galilee. So your sandal would not even touch the dirt in Samaria. So why did they hate them so much? Well, God's people were always rebelling. God had to send them into captivity. And so they'd go haul them off into captivity, and then eventually they'd come back, and they would say, whoa, it was so hard in captivity, we tried to stay faithful. And so then they'd come back to the people that didn't go, because everybody didn't go into captivity. Took most of them. Now, we're just going to do a little exercise to see how you would do it at taking slaves into captivity. If you're going to take a slave, do you take strong or weak slaves? Strong, so you leave the weak. Young or old? Young, so you leave the old weak. Okay, you take smart or dumb? Smart, so you're leaving old, dumb, weak. Just for grins, guys, don't answer this. You're sitting by your wife. Pretty or ugly? Of course you take the pretty ones. So you're leaving the dumb, ugly, weak, old. There's some other going, would I be taken as a slave? No, I would not, and I'm pretty confident in that. But, so they leave them behind. And there's a little bit of an inferiority thing anyhow. And you're in this occupied territory, and here are all these occupying soldiers. You're like, I'm in the armpit of the world. I've been gone a long time. And you're old and you're dumb and you're weak and you're ugly. But you look pretty good because I've been away from home for years. You want to have sex? No, I don't want to have sex. Whap, whap, beat. Next one. How about you? Okay. And you know what happens when you have sex? Okay, y'all look old enough to know this. What happens? If you have enough sex, what happens? But thank you. I'm glad somebody, like, can you say, yes, when you have sex, you have babies. And what are those babies? Half-breeds. Half-breeds. And so all the good Jews come back and say, man, what in the world happened? What is all this? Well, you don't know how bad it was here. And you don't know how, and they despised them. Despised them. And so when you talk about Samaritans and Jews, there's really a lot of enmity there. But this Samaritan, Jesus knew what he was saying when he said it. He saw the man and had compassion. Please hear this. Service starts with caring about people. When Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself, he wasn't saying, let me say that so you'll know you ought to help people. He was saying that, see, here, I want you to love people. And so he used his time and his energy. We're going to talk about this Sunday night, by the way, and praise it more for non-believers. But he cared, had used his time, his energy, his money. And in that story, it says, so who is the neighbor? Oh, man, it's a Samaritan. And you know what? You remember what Jesus said then? Go do the same. Jesus told us to go out in this world, loving our neighbor. And when we do, we serve people, we help people, we do for people. Because you know what? That's what Jesus did. Matthew 4:23, it says Jesus did two things. He healed their diseases and he talked about the kingdom of God. You can't do one without the other. It's a horrible preacher story that I'm convinced could never have been true, but it sure makes the point. So he had a group of church ladies, and they said, we need to teach this woman that lives a block down from the church, and we need to go talk to her about Jesus. So 3 or 4 of them get together, they go knock on her door. Nobody answers, knocks a little harder, and the door kind of pushes open. So they go in, and they hear a crying baby, and there's kids running around, and there's dirty diapers, and the house is a mess, and the sink pile of dirty dishes. And they go in, anybody home? And they hear a voice from the back. And so they go back, and the lady, single mom, is laying in bed. They said, it's 11 o'clock. Are you okay? No, I'm really sick. Well, what did the doctor say? Well, I can't go to the doctor. I don't have any money and no way to get there. You know what? I can tell this is a bad time. We'd love to talk to you about Jesus and invite you to church, but we'll come back when you're feeling better. Who would do that? But that would be as bad as saying, hey, don't worry about it. We got this cleaner whole house, walk out. And never say, by the way, we'd like to come back and visit about Jesus. Jesus did both. It always takes both. If you serve people and don't talk about Jesus, that's about as cruel and hateful as you can be. Because the best thing they need is Jesus. But if you're going to try to talk about Jesus and they got other needs and you blow right past them, they're like, I don't want to hear about your Jesus because he doesn't care. Because you don't care. So Jesus, since he did both of those, if we don't serve, we kill our credibility. And if we don't talk about Jesus, we're incredibly cruel. So a couple of things that you need to hear. In Matthew 5:16, we all know this. Let your light, we could even sing, we could sing the song, couldn't we? Just a lot of mine, so people may see your good deeds and do what? Why would they glorify God or praise God for something I'm doing? Because I said something about God. Now somebody says, how does that really work? Okay, I'll tell you how it works. So Kathy moved in next door to us. Now, I'm not a good yard guy. I'm not. But Kathy's looked like it was a goat farm. She wouldn't mow her yard. It's growing up. She wouldn't take care of it. And I was always telling my wife, she could at least mow it a little, just knock down the really tall weeds. Rent a goat. I don't care what. She needs to do something about that yard. So one day we're out doing our yard. My wife is mowing and I'm weeding along the edge. I look up and my wife looks right across the driveway, right into her yard. And I thought, oh my, she's had a stroke. She can't stop. I need to go get her. You know. Okay, if you've been married, this is probably 5 years ago, so we've been married 45. We weren't living at the ranch, so probably 5 years ago. And she looks over at me. When you've been married a long time, and then it was 45 years for us, you know how wives can communicate, never say a word? And here's what she told me with one look. Get that weed eater. Get over here. Start on the edge, and I'll mow. All that with one look. So I did. We're about halfway through, and Kathy pulls in. Gets out of her car, and Lisa gets in her car and just looks. So we shut everything off. Hey, Kathy, how you doing? She said, what are y'all doing? I said, well, you want to go mow in your yard? My wife's making the edge. What do you think we're doing? No, I said, you know, your yard looked like you needed help. And so she said, well, why? And so my wife, clearly I'm the spiritual giant in our family, but my wife says, you know, God's been really good to us, and he wants us to be good to our neighbors. You look like you could use some help. And then Kathy said, are you going to do the back? So my wife's closer. She walks to the back fence, comes back, and she literally says this, Steve will do it. Okay, I knew then it was not going to be good. And the front was horrible. The back looked like a jungle. It did. So as my wife started visiting with her, we found out she had never done a yard because her husband, who had died, always did her yard. And she moved to Abilene, she didn't know how to do a yard. In fact, she told Marcia, she said, you know, she said, I'd mow my yard. I even got a lawnmower. I just don't know what to do. And she said, Steve will show you. Which I did, by the way. We showed her how to, and she started mowing her yard, came to church with us a few times, found a guy, got married who was in the service, and they moved. We hear from occasionally on Facebook that says we're still trying to figure out our Jesus journey, we're going to church. I don't know where all that goes, but I learned a whole lot that day. If we had just said, hey, your yard needed help, we're good neighbors, that never starts on any kind of road. Or if we just said, listen, when you get your yard kind of cleaned up, maybe you want to come to church with us sometime. That's why all you have to do is say, when they say, why would you do this? Or say, what if they don't ask? Hey, you take food to a neighbor who's had a funeral or something. There's a million ways to do that. Hey, I saw a wreath on your door. Yeah, my dad. Man, we're so sorry. Look, we're going to bring a casserole over tonight. And can we just pray real quick? And if they say no, I say, okay, hey, if you ever need us, we'll bring the casserole tonight. Or we, real quick, we just pray. Well, we're big believers in the pray right there. Hey, God bless this family, give them peace, and we'll bring the casserole tonight. And we always say, then we always follow that up with, hey, what can we do now? And we'll sometimes say, we'll put on the card, hey, from Steve and Marcia in the name of Jesus. We always try to link Jesus to everything we do for anybody. Now that works for church too. I really believe the thing in Ephesians 2, that we are God's workmanship, God's portfolio to do the works he's prepared beforehand for us to do. I think God knows who you're going to meet today and next week. And he's got things set up that you can do. I don't know what it'll be. I don't know how they all are, because we're created in Christ Jesus to do good works. We don't do good works to be saved. We do good works because, that's right. But you've got to talk about Jesus when we do that. So even in our church things, a lot of churches do, like Trunk or Treat, put cars in the parking lot, have the trunk, you give out candy to the neighborhood kids, or they do breakfast with Santa, or whatever community stuff you do. Well, at Hillcrest, for a long time, they did those things. And then have little cards they could pick up and say, here's when church meets, call us if you'd like. But we decided to get more intentional about that. And we killed our crowd from about 700 kids down to about 400 kids. And I tell you, but we're still going to do it, because everybody that comes through now, they come through security too. They come through a little line. But we work the whole line saying, hey, glad you're here. One thing to do here is help people figure out their Jesus journey. Would you ever like to talk about that? And most people, nope. And if I'm working the line, everybody, they can hear me 10 people down. And so I see people, I start getting close, and they go, phone. But you know what? About 1 out of 20 people says, I might like help. And about a tenth of those don't ever show back up, and about half of them. But you know what? We've got people still coming to church from 3 years ago, and we started being much more intentional about saying, Here's why we're doing this. We're not doing this just to help your kids have a safe Halloween. We're doing, or whatever you're doing. We're doing this because we want to help you know about Jesus. And this is one way we can serve you. So tie everything to talking about service. Now, one other thing. Be sure you're serving. I like the raking thing. Let's rake leaves for our neighbors. I think that those kind of things are great. Do it in the name of Jesus. Tell them if we can help you specifically learn more about Jesus. We'd love to. But don't create service when there's no service that needs to be done. It's like, okay, well, let me run around and find somebody to do service for. God will put them in your life and you start praying for it. But the most famous service passage is probably John 13 when Jesus washes the feet of his disciples. Okay, you know why he washed their feet? Because they were dirty. That's right. He washed their feet because they were dirty. Because in that day, you didn't eat at tables like this. Your tables were low, you reclined around the table, and you ate together. So if your feet were dirty or smelly, that made for a really uncomfortable meal. And your feet were dirty and smelly because if you were in sandals in Judea, when it's 110 degrees and you're walking on a dusty road, your feet are dirty because you sweated, you walked in dirt, you're following camels and horses, which means, is he saying what I think he is? Yes, I am. That's why my wife won't let me wear my boots to church anymore, because, yeah, and people threw their garbage out in the street, because, you don't have garbage to pick up. And so your feet are, and so if you were a good host or everybody came to your house for a meal, first thing you do is have your servant wash their feet so everybody can eat comfortably. So Jesus hosts the meal, no servant there. They get ready to eat, nobody's feet have been washed, so what does Jesus do? So a couple of things, I'm shortcutting some of the story just to make it quicker, but here's what you need to know about that. Jesus said, you know what, something needs to be done. I'm not too good to do it, and it needs to be done. And if he can do that, the point of that is when people have need, you don't have to manufacture some kind of artificial service thing. I mean, I said youth group, okay, I love youth ministers. I love people working with young people, so, but I can't tell you how many youth retreats I've spoken at where they had a time to wash feet to demonstrate service. And you know what every kid did right before he washed feet? Ran back to where they were staying and did what? Wash their feet so whoever washed their feet wouldn't have to have. I thought, if you really take your shoes off, run around out here and then sit down and try this. So just know that. And Jesus did that because he knew who he was and where he was going. And the reason we do service, we know who we are. We're Jesus. And we know where we're going. We're going to heaven. And so that enables us. And he ends up with, if I, your Lord and Master, if I knew this, then you should do this. And so you do what you can, when you can, for whoever you can, in the name of Jesus. Peter and John are going to prayer meeting. And a cripple asked for help. I don't know if he knew who Peter and John were, and he thought, okay, it's preachers, so it's a good news, bad news. The good news is it's a preacher, they may give me something. Bad news, it's a preacher, they don't have anything, but he asked. And they say, we don't have any silver or gold, but what we do have, we give you. And so he healed me. Now, we misuse that all the time. Here's how we misuse that. I really don't have enough to help people, so I won't. Yeah, you do. You always, we all have different levels of what we can do to help people. I believe that's true. And we've got people at Hillcrest that regularly write checks for $1,000 or $2,000 to put in a fund to help the people we're working with. That's great. And we have people that say, listen, I don't know, but I got a little gas in the car. I can take them to the food bank. Okay, great. I mean, just don't let what you have or don't have be your excuse. Do whatever you can, for wherever you can, whenever you can, in the name of Jesus. That's the point of all of this. And so when they healed him, he jumps up and goes jumping and praising Jesus. A little more of that. I'm happy. I'm exuberant. We've got to be happy about what God has done for us. Then Peter's preaching, talks about the resurrection, telling the Jesus story. They get arrested, which leads to that famous passage in Acts 4. In verse 13, when they saw the boldness, some say the courage, of Peter and John, and recognized they were ordinary, uneducated men, but took note they had been with Jesus. You know what's going to make us do all this? You know what's going to keep us from going out there and making this up? Well, food is pretty good. That guy was kind of funny, and this was a nice morning. So good for me. If that's what we do, we kind of miss the whole point. But the reason this is going to motivate you is because we're just like they are. We're going to be bold. We're going to be courageous. Not because we're exceptionally well educated, not because we're extraordinary, but because we've been with Jesus. That's it. I mean, you don't have to have I love preachers. I love Peter. I love me. You know what? If you're looking for someone, well, they're great because look how smart they are. Okay, you got half of it right. He is. I'm not. But you know what? I love Jesus. I do. And he loves Jesus. And you know, I like him, but he's pretty ordinary. I mean, you're just kind of a guy. You married over your head, and I did too. So good for us. It speaks well of us. It does. But you know what? If we wait for only the talented or the really smart people to do it all, there are some talented, smart people in here. But most of us are just people who become extraordinary because of Jesus. That's what makes us extraordinary. And when we can do this. So do what you can for who you can, when you can, always in the name of Jesus. And when they say, man, I love you, thank you, you say, it's because of God. That's who gets the glory. Learn to start saying those kind of phrases. Because Jesus was good to me. Well, God, it's because God's great. However you just figure out how to always say that. So every time you help, every time you try and get an opportunity to tell the story, then invite, ask, share. Say, hey, can I tell you my story about Jesus? Or, yeah, boy, you did that. Why don't you do that? What can I tell you why Jesus has been so good to me? Start learning to say, here's what God has, is, and will do for me. We need to learn to talk about that. And if they say not interested, you don't say, can I have that money back? I'm not going to help you again. We don't do it for that. But it does give you a chance to do it. So we never make our help conditional. We just help people. So sometimes, okay, this is what, I'm not going to tell this one again in morning class, but I could. This is one of my Cuba stories. And old couple, they were farming in Cuba. Now, the Herald Truth's been in Cuba for years. And a guy named Tony Fernandez for 30 years has worked for us in Cuba. Cuba does this all over. They ask for rides, and you give rides to people because there aren't cars, aren't gas. I mean, it's just hard. And so the government actually has ads that say, pick up people, help people. And you'll see people in groups, if they have a little money, they'll wave and say, gas money, gas, So Tony drives around, and when he's on his way, he picks up people. So he offers a couple of rides. Tony lives in a town called Matanzas. So he's driving them down the road. He said, where are you going? So we're going to our farm. They were, after the revolution, one of the last people that were still had their farm and were farming it because it was a productive farm. And they were able to hang on to it. And so he said, well, I'll take you to your farm. And they said, no. The road we're on, when it turns to our farm, and I've been on the road before and after it was fixed. It's about a mile. And after it was fixed, you could drive that mile in about an hour. Before it's fixed, it would take us 2 hours to drive down that road because you both basically put it neutral and coasted and put it in drive just because potholes and rough and it's horrible. And Tony said, no, I'll take you. They said, you'll ruin your car. And he said, look at my car. What's left to ruin? They all laughed, and he drove them down that road. When they got there, on the way, he said, so what were y'all Matanzas for? And they said, we were taking care of some affairs for our son. He died. And they got to talking and said, we have 3 sons, one of whom killed himself. You know, how when you think life's hopeless, you can't see any way out, you don't have any hope. That's not an uncommon thing to happen. And then the other one had died of cancer. They said, we have one left, and he farms in a little village down the road. Tony said, well, when he dropped him off, he said, listen, can I pray for you? They said, we're atheists. We don't believe in your God. He says, okay, I do. He said, so can I pray? And they said, okay. So he prayed for him. Said, if I can ever help you, here's my number. Please call. And so occasionally they would call and say, we'll meet you at the main road. And he said, no. We'll come down and get you. And they, stubborn guy, he would always hike down toward them. So one day when we took him home, they said, are you going to pray with us again? And he said, yeah. Every time, don't I? And they said, yeah. They said, could we have one of those Bibles you carry around? He said, yes, you can. Would you like us to come out and help you learn it? They said, we would. So he came out, started teaching them, baptized both of them. I would tell you his name, I would, but here's the problem with that. He doesn't have any teeth, and he has a high-pitched thing, and he speaks Spanish, and his English is worse than my Spanish. We're down in bad territory. I tried in English, and here's what I got every time. If I said, what's your name, or Suyama, anything, here's what I got. Again, okay, what I'm getting out of that is Yakahi. I know that's not right. What is your name? So I finally just gave up. I don't know his name right now. But I've hugged him many times and loved him because they baptized him and they started a church at their farm. Started their son, who was in another village, they converted him. He started a church in his home. In fact, first time I met him, he was moving a horse trough to the front of his house. You know what for? Baptized people. Yeah, he's the one that when we were coming, he had all his neighbors invited in, couldn't get them all in the house. They were leaning in the window to hear the story of Jesus. Well, they petitioned the government because there was an abandoned farm next to theirs. Asked the Cuban government if they could farm it. I went there when they were asking them. It was solid rock. I mean, I couldn't see the dirt, the rocks. I thought, wait, they may get, I don't know what you're going to do with this, but okay. Government let them. Son moved over there. Church supported him. By support, I mean brought him a little food for the first year while they got that farm in shape with an old Russian tractor. I've got a picture of me sitting on an old Russian tractor. It's really kind of makes me love my little bitty American tractor, but still. They clean that thing up. The whole church comes out for planting and harvesting. The government gets a third of the produce. A third of it goes to old people in Matanzas, and they use a third of it to feed people in the church. All that started, all those people that came to Jesus, feeding all that started because Tony took an opportunity to serve and made sure he spoke about Jesus. When they said, I don't believe, he said, that's okay. I do. Can I pray anyhow? Loving and serving, you never know what happened. That, by the way, the other picture, they had the whole church come out right before planting and right before harvesting and pray over things. I preached that farm probably, I don't know, half a dozen times. It's a really neat thing. Let me remind you this about serving people. John 9 is the great story of the blind man. Be sure you see people, not theology. Here's what I mean. They're coming down the road. Here's this blind guy. And the disciples say this, hey, who sinned, this man or his parents, so he was born blind? Whose fault is it? I mean, did he do something? Now, I never have quite understood the question about if he's blind, what he did. I mean, he's been blind, he was born blind. Or maybe they didn't know it then, because later the parents say he was born blind. But it's really kind of interesting. It's really easy to try to see everybody through our theology lens, not our Jesus lens. And there is a difference. You know, why, whose fault is that? What's the issue here? I even hear Christians say, if we could just change enough laws, we would help all the hungry people if we just elect the right people. Or we'd get everybody to be moral if we'd elect the right people. And laws have never done any of that and never will. We have trouble doing that, and we're believers. Non-believers are never going to do what believers try to do. They're just not. So, you remember what happens. Jesus said, well, all right, let me tell you what God's going to do great work. He was blind. So God's work can be seen. And then remember what he did? Spit on the ground, made mud, and put it in the guy's eyes. So if you're the blind guy, here's what you hear. This discussion about who messed up. Jesus, That's all I wanted to talk. Does it really matter? I'm starving here. Please give me something. Oh, the Bible doesn't say that. Yeah, it says he spit on the ground. So, you know what I figure the blind man did? I figure he ducked. Or he did this. I don't know who that was, but. And then all of a sudden somebody, now I'm not real smart, but if I hear somebody spit, and the next thing I feel is mud, I'm like, you got to be kidding. Can this day get the world? And then they don't wash, you know what they do? Go wash it off and pull something. Wait, nobody's going to take care of this? And the guy does. He does. And you can see, and people don't recognize that the guy was blind. Something's different. I mean, he looks like it, but he's different. And the religious leaders call him in and yell at him about it because he did it on the wrong day from their perspective. And the guy goes from, hey, listen, I don't know, look, here's what happened. I was blind, put mud on my eye, and I can see, all the way to when he finished, he's like, why? You want me to tell it again? You want to be his disciples too? He goes from a blind guy sitting there getting mud in his eye to calling himself a disciple. But it was a journey. His parents were not supportive. He's a little sarcastic, and I like sarcastic people, so I'm like, this guy's pretty cool. And they kicked him out. And Jesus found him. That's the great end of that story. He tells him what happened. Says, you know, like not. Of course, he doesn't know who that is talking to him because he's never seen Jesus. And when he says, I am, he falls to his knees and worships Jesus. Sometimes it takes a while. I mean, the guys in Cuba, it took a while for that to play out. We've had people that we've taught and worked with and got right to the, we say this bad theology, but to the edge of the baptistry and watched them just drift back out, and then they come back. And I don't know. God knows how people move. God knows whether somebody's going to be reached later or whether they're not. I finally gave up trying to get behind them and push them on the edge of the baptistry. That's just not. You know what? It's a journey. The blind man is a great story for people. And I love that story too because it reminds us that when you become a Christian, it's going to get tough sometimes. So I want to tell you about my friend Al. That's Al in the middle. On your left is Guy Saylor. He and I were elders together at this time, actually over at Southern Hills. Al was a nurse who gave end-of-life care until he started going blind. Kind of hard to be a nurse if you're legally blind. And he has peripheral vision only. He cannot see in front of him. He hates me to tell this story, but I've seen Al use a chainsaw, and he does it like this. And he's asking me if I want to help. I was like, no thanks. So Al's very independent. He would mow his own grass. He mows like this. And so he ran out of gas. He has a gas can. He's walking down a busy highway on the edge of Abilene to a convenience store to get some gas. A guy named Tony driving his van. Tony's a handyman and a house parent and a children's home. Tony sees him, pulls over and says, hey, you need a ride? He says, well, I'm going to get gas. So come on, I'll get your gas. Tony takes him down there. Here's a little bit, buys his gas for him, buys him a coat, takes him back home, and Tony says, hey, I'll mow your yard for you. He says, no, I can do it. And Tony said, well, I'm glad to help you. He said, listen, my name is Tony, and I go to church right up here at Southern Hills. And if you ever want to go to church, we'd love for you to, I'd love for you to come with us. He said, Southern Hills, you know a guy named Guy Saylor. He said, well, of course I know Guy. And he said, hey, I used to give end-of-life care to his parents, and he's always asking me to church. And in fact, he called me the other day out of the blue and just said, I want to go to church, but I don't. I'm not going. I have a church, and we kind of let him go. But he said, I got a church, so but thanks. About a week later, he has an eye appointment. He calls for a cab because he can't drive. And the cab comes, picks him up, and he says, listen, I'm going to my eye doctor. I can tell you his name, but I can't remember his address, and I can't look it up. You think you could help me find it? He said, well, who's your doctor? He said, a guy named Gabe Atherton. The taxi driver's name is Chance. We had baptized Chance about 2 years before. Chance says, Gabe, I go to church with Dr. Avila. I know right where to take you. Drives him there. Al's trying to find his money and asks what it is. And chance says, hey, this is on me. And he said, I go over here to Southern Hills, and if you'd ever like to come to church, love to give you a ride, won't even charge you. He said, no, but okay, thanks. Goes in to see Dr. Avila, tells him the story. Gabe gets through his eyes and says, by the way, they meant it. If you ever want to go to church and they're busy, I'd love to take you to church. So he goes home, and about a week later, all this has happened. Guy calls him again out of the blue. Guy says, I don't know, I was sitting around one night and thought I ought to ask. Now he says, maybe it's the Holy Spirit kind of, So the guy calls and says, hey, Al, I'm just calling to see if you thought more about going to church with us. And Al says, I think God wants me to, yes. So guy hangs up, picks Al up, he comes to church. Now, in those days, I was traveling almost every weekend. I mean, I was out doing this a lot. But I had to be there. And so I'm in the foyer, and I see this guy I don't know. And so I'm walking over toward Al. And I hear this guy say, oh, there's Elder Steve right there. So I go up and say, hi, I'm Steve Ridgell. And Al says, are you Elder Steve? And I said, I'm Steve, and I'm an elder. I'm thinking, whatever, dude. I said, yeah, why? He said, well, my next door neighbor. I told him I was coming to Southern Hills, and he said, hey, they've got a traveling preacher there named Steve. I think he's an elder. He's been at my folk congregation in Fredericksburg. They love him. You ought to find him and meet him. And he said, so I came today because guy keeps asking me, I wanted to meet you. I said, well, that's great. Do you have questions about what we're doing? He said, I've got some questions. And I said, great. You want to have coffee one day? He said, yeah, I do. And I said, good. We'll get Guy to pick you up. He'll buy our coffee. I didn't give Guy a chance to ask. I just said, he'll buy our coffee. And so first time we had coffee, I said, and that's the coffee shop, by the way. We met every week when I was in town for about 7 or 8 months at that coffee shop. His first question was this. He looked at me and said, you think God wants me to go to Southern Hills? Now, I don't know anything that's gone on. I'm like, well, I think God wants you to follow his son, Jesus, and I think you need to be in community and worship. And why? And he tells him all these things that, the first one I thought, well, that's interesting. The second one I thought, this is spooky. Third one I thought, God's talking to me. I said, maybe he is. So we started telling Jesus' story. We'd meet with weeks I was in town. We'd pray together, talk about life, and do a little Jesus story. So one day he says, I don't want to come to Southern Hills for a few weeks. Okay? He said, I've got a guy that I used to give end-of-life care to his parents, and he is teaching a class over at Hamby Church of Christ. And he wants me to come here, his class on Acts. You care if I go for a few weeks? Now, I'm going to be gentle here. Southern Hills then, several years, we were almost 1,000. And a lot of high-impact praise, a lot of, contemporary singing, and, just that kind of thing. Hamby was the church I grew up in, I guess. Nothing changed from 1960 at Hamby. You need to wear a tie if you can wait on the table. You sing out of the songbook. They sing some songs that are contemporary for 1960. And they're just, that's who they are. So he went there 3 or 4 weeks. We still met some. And so he said, okay, I'm ready to come back to Southern Hills. Okay, how'd you like Hamby? He said, y'all aren't much alike. I said, no, I preached that at Hamby. I said, no, we're not. He said, the singing's way different. He said, he told us all things were different. And he said, but it's kind of funny. He said, when they were teaching that class, my friend, he kept saying a lot of stuff you say. I said, we just kind of same book, same God. So, it's kind of the same stuff. It just may look a little different. He said, yeah, that was interesting. So we started telling stories again. We were talking about how people in Acts heard about Jesus and what they did. One day we were talking, and we were sitting in that exact configuration. Al was in the back. And that little red Bible is one I kind of had, He reached over and picked up that Bible, and he did this. Slammed it down. They jumped, and he said, Steve, you're just trying to baptize the hell out of me. The whole coffee shop gets quiet. And I'm like, and then he said, I guess sort of literal. I said, yes, literally, that is what we were trying to do. Yes, you get it. And so we ended up baptizing Al. And then because that's what we did in those days. I love this kind of thing. We got Al up front next Sunday after church, said, Al, we're going to bless Al. He just became your new brother. So we told a little bit of the story. And all those guys, Chance and Gabe and Tony, and everybody comes up and surrounds Al. So we have a prayer blessing, and everybody claps, says, this is so great. And then Al leans over and says, I know we're going to have another song. The song leader stops. And Al said, aren't you going to tell them the whole story? And I said, the whole story? He said, you know what I told you. Okay, that's every preacher's nightmare. And so do you say it? So I thought, you know what? He wants to, it happens. So I told him. Fortunately, the whole church laughs, and then they applaud again. And then they get through, and Al says this, before we sing, can I say something? Every preacher's second nightmare. Now, y'all know me well by now. I'm like, sure. Hand him the microphone. And here's what Al says. He said, Steve told you my story, and here are all these brothers that kept asking me at church and talking to me, and Guy, and he said, I only have one question. Who's your Al? And then hand him back the microphone. And I thought, greatest sermon ever preached at Southern Hills. And so you're going, okay, so that's a great story. What's the point? Who's your Al? That's the point. You know what? Tony just saw somebody that needed gas. And Chance just heard somebody that needed gas. I can help you. Gabe heard somebody. You put all that together. Guy was just asking the church. I don't know how many. Guy said he asked him dozens of times. You never know when it's going to click. So you know what you do today and tomorrow and Monday? You keep asking people. You keep saying, can I tell you about, would you like to hear more about what a Jesus journey looks like? Would you like me, can I help you there in the name of Jesus? You just keep throwing out Jesus stuff everywhere you go. And one of these days, somebody is going to act on it. So last thing we're going to talk about. You live forgiveness so they know the way Jesus works. You serve with purpose so they know what it looks like when you follow Jesus. Because you love God with everything you are. You love the people in the world just like you love yourself, and we have good news to share. So the last thing we're going to talk about is speaking boldly when you get there. So the next 3 nights, Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night, I'm going to speak for you. I'm going to tell stories on behalf of God and His church to non-believers. Now, somebody said, what if no non-believers are there? I won't tell them anyhow, because that's just kind of who I am. You can say, okay, I'll go tell that story tomorrow to somebody. I don't know what's going to happen, but if non-believers are there, we're going to talk tomorrow night about the Good Samaritan. And it's designed for people who say, there are a lot of people out there, I don't want your church, I don't want your religion, I don't want your rules, I don't want your God, I don't want all this stuff, but I would like to help people make the world a better place. Okay, there's a guy that's just like you who wanted to, he helped people. That's Jesus language. I want to help people. That is Jesus language. And so we're hoping that will help them. Monday night, we're going to do the Jesus, demons, pigs, and you, the story of Legion. For people who kind of think, if you really knew me, you'd know God doesn't want a guy like me. If you knew the stuff I battled with. We're going to talk about that. And Tuesday night, we're going to tell the story of Philip and the Ethiopian. And it's really designed for people like, I don't know what's going on. I don't get church. I visit, but I don't understand it. And so it's all designed to plant seeds, water seeds. I hope people respond, decide to follow Jesus right then, or we're going to follow everyone I'm with. If you've heard this and you want to know more, talk to the person that asked you, talk to somebody sitting around you. So, yeah, we're hoping they're with somebody, but we're going to do that because at some point you can live forgiven and you can serve people, but we've got to talk about Jesus. So, let us go through a few of these. The woman at the well in John 4. That's a great illustration about how to have Jesus conversation. She's a woman who has very little self-esteem. And I tell you how you know that. All the women go to draw water from the well early in the morning. Why do you go early in the morning? Cooler, and you got to have water for the day, so you go get your water. And she doesn't go. She comes at noon to get water. Either because the other people, this is what we always say, they made her feel so unwelcome. And maybe that's true. she might have felt so shunned. I mean, it may be one of those where she had to go get water, and they were saying, you know, she's the one who's married 5 times. She's living with that guy now. Boy, don't let your husband near her because she's that kind of guy. I mean, that kind of person. You don't want to. Maybe they did make her feel so, or maybe she did it to herself. Maybe she felt so ashamed of who she was. I can't go with the good. And everybody debates how she had 5 husbands. They all dump her. They all die. Either way, it's kind of a scary thing. Either I'm the guy that says, yeah, I'll live with you, but I ain't marrying you because I want to live more than I. Or it's like, she's like, man, I can't keep, I'm worthless. I am worthless. So she goes at noon. Jesus just asked her for a favor. Hey, can I give you water? Now, he doesn't make a big deal about, I mean, I know you're a woman, and I know you're a Samaritan. I'm a Jewish male, but I'm going to do this because I'm the Son of God. He just says, can I have a drink of water? And she draws some of the appropriate inferences. Well, you know, I'm a Samaritan. Why are you talking to me? And so they visit a little bit. The discussion, he turns the discussion to living water. At some point, your conversations always want to get around to Jesus. Always. And he's a little too close to home, so she tries to sidetrack him with a worship. But I don't think y'all have that in Michigan, but in Texas, we have worship boards sometimes. You know, I mean, everybody knows that you lead slow or fast or high or low, or you don't blow a pitch pipe because next thing you know, you'll have a 50-piece band in, or bring in the band because that's the only way they'll listen, or don't sing anything contemporary past 1962, or on and on and on. Everybody knows you ought to have the communion first, all the stuff that you know, I don't know where his tie is, but he can't be a real preacher. You wore jeans to preach. Okay, I can say, okay. I forgot what I had on. I was like, let me check first. You know, she tried that. Our fathers say we're superior. You guys say we're. Remember your purpose when you're talking to people about Jesus. Our goal is not to convince everybody the right way church is organized, the right way to worship. If they don't know Jesus, none of that matters. Please understand, I'm not saying it doesn't matter ever. I'm saying if you don't know Jesus, it really doesn't matter. Because you're not going to go to heaven and say, boy, I wish I believed Jesus. But I do understand why those guys didn't have a piano. So God, will that get me in? I love Jesus. He said, you know, there's the time coming, and here's what God wants. People worship in spirit and in truth. There it is. You have to teach them how to worship in truth. Okay, some people think that means the doctrine of worship. Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth. That's right. He said that. I think he's saying, hey, I'm truth here. And I think Spirit's the Holy Spirit. That's just me. You can disagree. I don't care. But I think Jesus is saying, let's focus on what really matters here about worship. And so I think the point is, don't let them sidetrack. Aren't y'all the guys that don't do music? Let me explain. It is music. Here's why and that, don't get into that, you know. And above all, don't say, you know, the Bible clearly says you can't have an instrument. And then, boy, bless your heart when they say where, you go, well, you know, 1 Ridgell 3:8. I mean, I don't know. Be careful about it. Even when you're sure you got it right, that's not the point's Jesus. Always, it is. Now, well, how are they going to know? Because when they decide to follow Jesus, we will disciple them. And we won't start with worship. We'll start with loving God, loving others. Because people that come out of the world, they got to learn how to get out of their sins. They got to learn how to live forgiven first. And most people that really don't know Jesus, their first issue is not, so why do we have that little cup that's full of grape juice? That's not the point. If you say, hey, that's the blood of Jesus, the body of Jesus, we take it together. Okay. Do they need to know more? Yes, they do at some point. But non-believers need to know Jesus. And here's the cool thing. When he said, hey, when the Messiah comes, that's me. She went and told the whole village her story. Now, one other thing I will tell you, when he said, go get your husband, everybody said, that's right. He was pointing out how badly she needed Jesus and forgiveness. No, he wasn't. You know what he was pointing out? I know everything about you, and I love you anyway. So when people say, well, you know, my background, I mean, if you knew I did, Okay, one thing you can't do is, holy smoke, we never had anybody like you at church. But you know what? Hey, why don't you come anyhow? You can't do that. And the whole village comes out to hear Jesus because of her story. And you know what it says? We came because of her story. We stayed to hear you. So when you're telling your story to somebody, here's how I found Jesus, here's what brought me to Jesus. The point of that is for them to get Jesus. And someday you will get this. So Brian's the one in the checkered shorts, and the guy in the bright blue shirt is a guy named Chris Vaughn. He works for a car dealership. He's a very active evangelist. Bill Chris. I'm next to Brian, and the guy on the other end is Walt. At the time this happened, Walt's wife had just left him, and last time you heard from her, she was out in California following the group around. So he was pretty wrapped up at all this time. So here we are. We do a class at Hillcrest called the Jesus Journey class on Wednesday nights. Our elders are great. On Sunday morning, they excuse our preacher from teaching big class. They told the whole church, don't ask Nathan to teach your big, he teaches one called the secret class. And then they follow that up with, don't ask Steve to teach the big class on Wednesday night. We're like we have a big kind of catch-all class. And I was teaching a lot, and they said, Steve's out of that. He's going to start one called the Jesus Journey for people who are trying to figure out what it is, how you get on it. So we just told our people, here's what we're doing. If you want to help do that with people, not learn about how to do it. Then come into class, and we invited a few people. We started with 8 or 10, and we probably got 45 or so now. But Chris in the blue had invited Brian's wife to come, and she brought her husband. So he came to our journey class. Boy, he was up and down, and fidgety, and got up, walked around, sat down, and went out and smoked a cigarette, came back, sat down. And finally, about the third time he was there, he looked around everybody and said, I shouldn't get up all the time, but I'm a 5-time recovering meth addict. So he said, my brain's kind of gone. And everybody said, okay, so what do you do with that? Everybody said, oh, well, we're glad you're here. And, okay. So we kept talking about things. And one day he came up and said to my wife, he said, your name's Ridgell? I said, yes. He said, do you have a daughter? I said, we do. He said, it's Julie Ridgell. My wife said, well, it's Cope now, Julie Cope, but yeah, that's our daughter. He said, I was at school with her. She said, really? He said, she was cool and I was not, so I didn't really know, but said he said, I just want you to know your daughter was always nice to me. Okay, good. He said, so tell her Brian said hi. So we told our daughter, she's like, who? Okay, that's fine. But so eventually he was listening to this stuff, and one day he calls Chris and says, can you and Steve come to the hospital? Yeah, we can. So we go over to the hospital. Chris takes off. I meet him. Brian had been in, and they told Brian he had a tumor on his heart, and they would have to do surgery, and they couldn't let him leave the hospital until they took the tumor out. It was that critical. So Brian said, I got to thinking, he said, I could die in this surgery, maybe. And he said, I think I'm going to hell. You know the answer to that? He said, yeah, it's Jesus. I need to be baptized. Why? He said, we know that whole dying to myself, because Jesus died and whole raised to a new life. So if I die, I get to go to heaven. Okay, I might have said it a little different, but yeah, basically you got that. Yeah, you got it. He said, so I want to do that. Well, first he said, first we talked about, can God forgive all my mess? So I told him some of my mess, and Chris told him some of his mess, and said, God's been pretty good with us. Told him some of my daughter's mess, because he knew her. He's like, okay. So he decided he wanted to be baptized. So we have a good relationship with hospitals in Abilene. I'm an honorary or volunteer. I've got a little chaplain badge. I just wave it. They let me go anywhere, and it's kind of cool. So I said, yeah, it's really, I'm like, hey, look at me, man. You stand in line, and look at me. I go. So we called the chaplain's office, and we got a guy who's baptized. I said, great, y'all done that. Who is it? Where is it? We told him. He said, oh, he's on the south location. Yeah. I said, we let y'all use they have a pool for the rehab on the north location. Our south hospital doesn't have a pool. And he said, we don't have anything. I said, well, we'll drive over to the north side and bring you back. He said, I don't think I can get a doctor to sign off on that. He said, they won't let him out of the hospital well, this is a really big deal to him. He said, I don't think we're going to let Brian go because he's in bad shape. So we tell Brian, we all start praying about it. And one day a couple of days later, I'm up there late in the afternoon. One of his doctors comes by. So he tells him kind of, okay, we're trying to, and you've got pneumonia, we think, and you're pretty sick. And he said, we need this to happen quick, but we gotta get you over this pneumonia. And Brian said, well, I had something I kind of want, I kind of want to, and finally I said, Doc, he's trying to ask you if he can be baptized. Doctor looked at me and said, what are you, a dunker or pourer? And I said, well, we're Church of Christ, so we're kind of dunkers, He said, oh no way we're putting him in the water. And I said, well, it's a pretty big deal to him. Brian said, I'd rather do that than have the surgery. And the doctor said, I appreciate it. But he said, no, if we sign you, we can sign you out. You do whatever you want to. But to get back in, you have to start all over again with insurance. And he said, I think you endanger your surgery. I said, I'm not sure a doctor will sign for that. Okay. He said, I'm sorry, guys. I don't know what else to do. I said, no, we do. We're going to pray about it. And he said, well, okay. So 3 days later, he goes in and says to Brian, he said, okay, here's what we're going to do. You've got pneumonia. We're going to have to put you on a week's round of really intense antibiotics, but you can take them at home. We're not going to literally check you out of the treatment. We're just going to check you out of the hospital. Insurance will pay for everything. You can come back in a week. And I had to be there. You turn around and said, and you can do whatever Brian wants you to do. So this is us. Here's why I hate Satan. The day we were going to baptize him, it's West Texas, and it's February, and it's 91 day, and the next day, it's 32, and the wind's blowing, and it's cold, and I said, not a problem, Brian, we're going to baptize you in the baptistry. So I called the office and said, hey, we're going to come and baptize Brian right before church, about 6 o'clock, and they said, well, our heater's malfunctioned in the baptistry. It's cold water. So we're sitting around, Walt says, I've got it. Meet me at 2 o'clock. So I pull up at 2 o'clock, my wife and I go up, and Walt pulls off his horse trough, one of those big plastic rubber horse troughs, pulls off, says, we're going to fill it with hot water, leave it in the sun all day, and at 5:45, we'll fill it to the brim with hot water. Be great. So we fill it up, we pull it out there in the sun, and we get there at 5:30. The sun is not, there hasn't been no sun, it hadn't helped a bit. So it'd start pouring hot water in it. And we put so much hot water into it, we got it from freezing cold to really cold. And so we're just like, man, so we told Brian, we said, listen, this is not working. He said, yeah, well, I got to do that. If I die, I got to do this. So it's like, okay, so here's the plan we developed. We told him the story, asked him what he believed about it, because we always ask people to do their confession. And asked him what he said, well, Jesus died for me and I want to live with him. So, okay. So Chris and I picked him up, put him in the horse trough, baptized him, jerked him up, Walt picked him up in a blanket, ran him into the building, dried him off, put on dry clothes for him. 5 days later, he goes to the hospital to have his surgery. They're going to do the last testing. And the doctors came in and said, we have good news and bad news. Which do you want? And Brian says, I don't care, I've been baptized. The boy, Brian, you tell him, buddy. So he said, I don't care, I've been baptized. They said, well, okay, well, here's the bad news. You have a tear in your heart. And he said, by the tumor? And they said, no, that's the good news. We can't find the tumor. What we thought was a tumor apparently is a little tear. And Brian says, okay, you've heard enough of the story. Brian goes, God did that. And I thought, yes, he did. Sometimes it takes something dramatic for people to all of a sudden come to their senses a little bit and say, but if Chris hadn't asked his wife to come and Brian hadn't come, if my daughter in 7th grade hadn't been nice to everybody, I don't know if he finds Jesus. If we hadn't tried to talk to him and he hadn't sat through all those classes, I don't know. When he said, can I be forgiven? If we weren't willing to say, here's kind of our journey. He can forgive me. He can forgive you. If we had run when he said it's a 5-time meth addict, we would have said, boy, you're right, it shows. You've got to take people where they are because God brings them to you. So, a couple other speaking boldly. Acts 16, Paul and Silas are in jail. You know this story. Right now, I'm not going to focus on the jailer. Here's what I want you to hear. Do you remember what Paul and Silas were doing at midnight? Singing and praying. Now, I'm going to tell you Steve's absolute conviction because what happens next. They weren't praying to be let out of prison. They were praying to glorify God, whatever happened. And here's how I know that. If they were praying to be released and have an earthquake and everything opens up, what would they have done? Yeah, I just said, thank you. And I would have meant, thank you, God. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. I'll always talk about you. And out I go. And they did. So I don't think they were praying for God to let them out of prison. I think they must have been praying, God, help us honor you, help us glorify you, whatever happens. And I don't think they were singing songs of lament. I don't think they were going through the Psalms going, well, find another depressing song because we're dying here. I think they were probably singing contemporary praise songs. Not contemporary, our time. I think they were singing praise. I do. Because we Christians speak boldly even in our worship. We pray, we sing, we boldly, when we do the Lord's Supper in the morning, we are proclaiming the Lord's death till he comes. Everything we do, we are speaking boldly about Jesus. And even when it goes badly for us, when we find ourselves in jail, we worship boldly. And they did. And when the earthquake comes and the jailer figures out his life is over and he's going to kill himself, they're able to say, don't do that. We are all here. Who's the all? All of Silas? Wow. All the prisoners maybe? There's how you live when you live forgiven, so you worship boldly, people notice. The jailer said, so what do I do to be saved? And you know what they did there? You know what they did? Read the text. They spoke the word of the Lord to them. They talked about Jesus. Right? It's almost like they did the whole, hey, died for your sins according to the scripture, was buried and raised from the dead on the third day according to the scripture. And after he tells them that, they were baptized, he and their whole house. I don't know if everybody was sitting there or who went back and said, let me tell you this real quick, and I'm going to do this. Y'all want to, I don't know how it all happened, because all scripture says, he said, whatever you be saying, they told them the word of the Lord, and then they all responded. And then at the end of that, they rejoiced and had a celebration breakfast. That's why breakfast is my favorite meal, because it's in the scripture right there. Because I figured the earthquakes at midnight, and they went through all that, and then they were baptized, then they had a meal, it had to be breakfast. And they rejoiced because they had believed. Yes, so the point of that, there's where you teach them about baptism. No, there's where you teach them about Jesus. And what do you do when you find out about Jesus? Yeah, just don't get the cart before the horse. I heard people say, okay, they spoke the word of the Lord. I mean, here's the important thing. They were baptized. And they didn't really believe until they were baptized. No, that's not the important part of it. The important part of it is the word of the Lord about Jesus. And then they responded to it by being baptized. Now, occasionally people say, I don't know, you keep saying don't emphasize baptism. No, don't put it at the same level as Jesus. Baptism is a response to Jesus. It is not Jesus. It's the response to Jesus. And if we're not careful and all we do is put our emphasis on the response, we're going to miss the boat. So again, I'm going to say this carefully, but it's true with our kids we raise. Some of us have talked about this a little. We make sure all of our young people are baptized. I'm not sure it's intentional. I don't think nobody means to not give them Jesus. But I think they get a whole lot. And we will, people will say, we've got to baptize all our kids. No, we've got to get all our kids to believe in Jesus. And I promise you, I would much rather talk about Jesus and assume everybody's going to be baptized than talk about baptism and assume they're going to love Jesus. Now, somebody said, I don't know, you need to be stronger on baptism. I don't know, we baptize a lot of people. And even then, some of them don't stay. But we want to be sure they know Jesus. So, you never know when you're going to end up in jail singing praises. Somebody's going to say, what do I do to be saved? And then you talk about Jesus. And then you baptize them all. Then you have breakfast. Steve's personal theology on that last part. I'm not sure that's really right. Or, you remember Legion? We're going to talk about him one night. The guy with all the demons, no relationships, hard life, cutter, cries himself to sleep, all of that. Meets Jesus, who's not afraid of his demons. I tell this story a lot to non-believers, especially ex-offenders and addicts, or any of us that have addictive sin in our life. It's a great story because Jesus isn't scared of your stuff. He's not. You can't scare Jesus off by saying, you don't know who I am. And I have people sometimes who literally say, if you really knew, if Jesus does know. He does know. He's not scared of your stuff. In fact, he'll free you from the demons. And that is a big deal. And the town comes out, all the story. The town comes out and sees Legion healed. And the power of Jesus frightens them to the point where they ask Jesus to leave their town. Now think about that. And I'm going to tell you, it would not be true here, but I think there are probably churches that actually, in effect, say, Jesus, we're going to worship you, but don't get too close. Get away from here. We don't want you bringing in all these people. We don't want to, we'll even do some seminars about evangelism. Just don't make us do it and bring all those non-believers in here and see them be new Christians. Because they're all messed up. They don't know how to act in church. Don't know about worship. They ask stupid questions and on and on and on we go. And we've got to buy them food all the time and they don't have transportation here. Every bit of that's right. And we want to welcome them in because of the grace of God. That would be us. So when they tell them to leave, you remember what Jesus does? Gets in the boat and Legion comes to get in with him. Well, yeah. I mean, the guy that changed your life forever, sure he did. And he starts in the boat and Jesus says, no, you go and tell your family what the Lord has done for you. And that is where you start talking about Jesus. So it's time to quit, so I'm actually going to come back and tell you. I just want to tell you this real quick. When you talk about Philip and Ethiopia, it is a great story. Here's what I want you to hear out of that. An angel says, go to the desert road, and Philip goes. I don't know where God's taking you. I do not know who God's put in your life. But I promise you this, if you pray for God to bring people into your life who need you and need Jesus, he will do that. And so he did. And then he goes to this desert, but doesn't know why, by the way. And then the Holy Spirit says to him, go to that chariot. And he runs and then has the guts to say, you know what you're reading? No, I don't understand it. I need somebody to help me. And he tells him about Jesus and ends up baptizing him. And then he spends the next 4 weeks telling him all about how to work. No, wait a minute. No, it's great. He baptized him. When he brings him up, Philip's caught up by the Holy Spirit. I've got to ask the Ethiopian, what you think? It's like, hey, thanks, Philip. He goes on his way rejoicing. I love Philip, that boldness, because please hear this. I believe the Holy Spirit works in Christians. I do. I believe that's absolutely. But I also believe the Holy Spirit works on non-Christians. And I believe he still does today what he did then. I believe the Holy Spirit connects seekers with believers. And so you need to be open to those. And God may be saying, hey, I got somebody here who wants to know me. I'm going to let them work with. I'm going to put them in the neighborhood with. And it's you he's counting on to do that. So I think that is an important thing. So I could do a couple other ones, but I'm just going to back up and do this one story, and then I'm going to pray and we'll end. So I was doing a seminar very similar to this in the PD region of South Carolina. I didn't know when they first told me the campaign is going to be we're going to have a campaign in the PD region. I didn't hear it very clear. And I said, we're going to call it the PP. Why do you can't say that? And they said, PD region. I said, okay, I still don't know, but okay. So I had a huge crowd, and we did what we're going to do the next 3 nights here. This is one of the nights. A lot of people brought their friends, a lot of church people were there. So we're doing just like this. And the night we took this, where the story comes from, I preached the story of Legion. So a lady came up after, her name was Betsy. She said, can I tell you a story? Sure. And she said, I need to tell you my spiritual journey. Okay. She said, I was real active at church. Hadn't been baptized, but came all the time and was really active. And man, one night we had a youth devotional, and youth minister said, you can tell me anything. We can talk about anything. I'll never go anywhere past here. He said, so Well, we told him a lot of stuff that we were wrestling with, going on in our lives. And the next morning, the preacher preached a sermon about all the things we told the youth minister. And she said, I was done. But I thought, I shouldn't quit church. So I went to the elders and said, hey, can I just be I don't want to go to the youth stuff anymore. Can I just go in the nursery and hold the babies? And they said, as soon as you're baptized. And she said, well, I'm not, can I just hope? No. And she said, so I just left church. I said, well, I'm sorry, okay. And then she said, then, after I left, I got married and had a baby. And I thought, I don't want my baby to not know Jesus. So I called the preacher and said, can you and your wife meet me and just baptize? I don't want anybody else to know, but I need to be baptized. And the preacher said, well, you need to kind of come to church. And so I was baptized. I don't come real regularly, but I come some. And said, he called me and said, I ought to come hear you because he said, you were really funny. And I said, well, did he say anything about Jesus? He said, oh, yeah. He said you talk about Jesus, but you would be funny. Like, okay, I'd rather that be in a different order, but okay, whatever. And she said, and you really are funny. And I said, and she said, no, I appreciate the Jesus story, but I just wanted you to know I'm going to do better. Okay. 4 months later, I get an email from her that says, you need to know this story. She said, I have a cousin named Heather, and she was in ICU. And my aunt called my mom and said, could you and Betsy come see Heather? She's dying. And she said, now, I need to tell you, Heather she was reaping what she had sown. A lot of drugs, a lot of alcohol, lived on the streets and everything that entails. Said her body's just giving it up. And so my mom said, we need to go see her. And I said, well, okay. And then my aunt said, can y'all say something about Jesus to her? She's like, I don't know what to say about Jesus. I mean, you heard my story. You knew I wasn't very well grounded, but I thought, I'm just going to tell her that Legion story. And said, I couldn't remember it very well, but my mom helped me find it, and I read it again. And I told Heather. He said, when I got through, Heather looked at me and said, do you believe that's true? I said, well, yeah, it's in the Bible. I think it's true. And she said, do you think Jesus can heal my demons? I said, I think. And she said, okay, I want to hear another one. Can you come back next week and tell me more? And she said, I'd like to look at that story. So I said, we got around and gave her a Bible. So I remembered how you told her about how to learn to look up things. And I told her here was the table of contents. And the big black numbers are the chapters, and the little numbers where you find it. We showed her where that story was and told her she could read it for herself. And we came back the next week and said, I told her another one, the story you told the next night. And said, then I saw the stories I'd heard from you. So I started calling my preacher and saying, tell me a story I can tell her. And he'd give me a story, tell me where I could read it. And I'd just go tell her. And so she said, we started doing that. She said, I thought you would like to know 2 things. She said, 2 weeks before Christmas, Heather lost her earthly battle. The consequence of all her life, she died. But the week before that, she was born again. They let us take her in bed, and I thought you would like to know that. I don't know who your Heather is. I don't know when God's going to put you in somebody's life that's going to say, do you think God can fix me? Do you think God can really do? And I'm careful. When somebody says, hey, you think God can save my marriage? I don't know, but I do know God can fix your life. Whatever that means, however that plays out. We get a lot of, and we have people that say, you know how bad, I get it all. All I know is Jesus is the answer to everything. And our world needs him desperately. And all the people that are dying in their sins out there need to know that God loved them enough for Jesus to come die for them. They're not going to know it unless they see it in us and we show them how we serve and we speak boldly about Jesus. And I'm going to tell you, if we will keep praying for God to send people and help us see them, have the eyes to see and to speak boldly, it will change. I don't know when or how, but I'm going to tell you this. I believe God's here, and we are here. And I believe God is going to do something powerful, whether it is today and here, whether it's just to convict some of you to talk to people, whether it's going to happen tomorrow morning or over the next few nights. I don't know when, I don't know how, but I do know if we ask, God shows up and works. He always does. So let's pray together. Father, there's a lost world out there that needs to know you. And Father, all of us in here, somebody told us the good news. A parent, a mate, a preacher, a friend, a co-worker. Father, we learned about Jesus, and Father, we bought in. And Father, we confess to you we're not perfect. You know better than anyone that we struggle still. Father, we love you, and we are so thankful for our forgiveness. And Father, We know that you want the whole world to live with you. And they'll only do that if they know your Son. So, Father, we want to tell people about your Son. So, Father, we're going to ask you to connect us to non-believers, however you want to do that. And, Father, we're going to pray that we'll have the eyes to see people who are in need and want you, we'll have the courage to say a word about your Son. So, Father, bring people to us, give us the right things to say, help us know what to do and ask. And, Father, just give us the courage to act on it. And we will sow seed and we will water. We will be confident that you give the increase. In the name of Jesus, amen.